Hello and welcome to The Sleepy Scientist. This is your time to unwind, to let the day slow down and to settle into something calm, curious, and maybe just a little unexpected. Before we get too far, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from tonight? If you enjoy these quiet science wanderings, a like and a subscribe help more than you might think. And for those of you who have already joined our little community here, thank you. You're the reason I get to make these bedtime journeys into science and wonder. Now I can't promise this video won't keep you awake, but if it does, at least you'll drift off knowing a little more about some of the most unusual creatures ever to walk the earth. There are far worse reasons to lose a few minutes of sleep. So, what makes a dinosaur strange? Is it a giant claw, a trumpet-shaped head, or the ability to glide through a prehistoric forest on four wings? Let's find out. Dinosaurs have always occupied a strange space in our imaginations. They are at once impossibly ancient and yet startlingly familiar. We picture them as monsters, as giants, as distant relatives of the creatures we know today. But when you look closer, the truth is far more interesting, and in many cases, far stranger. Most of us can name a few classics: the towering, sharp-toothed tyrant, the three-horned herbivore, the plate-backed stegosaur. These are the celebrities of the Mesozoic. Yet the dinosaur family tree is sprawling, and hidden among its branches are species that seem to have stepped out of a dream, or perhaps a surrealist painting. They had proportions that baffle scientists, behaviours that are still mysterious, and adaptations so peculiar that they feel almost like mistakes. Except nature rarely makes mistakes without a reason. Strange dinosaurs are more than just oddities. They are living evidence of evolution's boundless creativity. Each bizarre crest, sail, claw, or feather tells a story about survival in worlds very different from our own. Sometimes these traits were for finding food, sometimes for avoiding becoming food, and sometimes, it seems, for the sheer purpose of showing off. In this journey, we're going to step quietly into their ancient habitats. We'll watch the sunlight catch the spines of a strange-necked giant. We'll hear the eerie call of a duck-billed dinosaur's head tube echoing through a swamp. We'll glide on the breeze alongside a tiny predator with wings on all four limbs. And as we go, we'll see that in the dinosaur world, normal was really just a matter of perspective. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's begin our walk among the strangest dinosaurs that ever lived. If you were to walk through a Jurassic forest over 150 million years ago, the first thing you might notice is how small you feel. Towering conifers and ginkgos reach high into the sky, their canopies knitting together far above. The air is warm, humid, and buzzing with prehistoric life. Somewhere in the distance there is the slow, deliberate creak of something enormous moving among the trees. Then, emerging from the greenery, a creature so outlandishly proportioned that your sense of scale might falter. A Mamenchisaurus. This dinosaur is famous for one thing above all else: its neck. Not just long, but astonishingly so. Mamenchisaurus holds the record for the longest neck of any known dinosaur, stretching to nearly half the length of its entire body. Imagine a creature over 70 feet long, with more than 30 feet of that taken up by neck alone. It is as if nature decided to push the limits of vertebrate design, just to see how far it could go. The neck was supported by an impressive series of vertebrae, over a dozen in some species, each one elongated like a stretched spool. These bones were honeycombed with air sacs, a clever adaptation that made them lighter without sacrificing strength. It is an elegant example of evolutionary engineering, the same sort of structure birds use in their hollow bones today. Without this weight-saving trick, the neck would have been too heavy to lift or maneuver. What did Mamenchisaurus do with this extraordinary reach? The most obvious answer is feeding. The Jurassic forests were rich in tall vegetation, and having a neck like a biological crane meant access to a buffet most other dinosaurs could not touch. Picture it sweeping its head slowly through the treetops, stripping branches of foliage with peg-like teeth that were perfect for raking leaves but not for chewing. Food was swallowed mostly whole, relying on its vast digestive system to break it down over time. Interestingly, the neck may also have allowed Mamenchisaurus to feed more efficiently without moving its massive body too much. Instead of plodding from tree to tree, it could simply pivot its neck to graze over a wide area, saving energy and avoiding unnecessary trips through uneven terrain. In a world where sheer size was both an advantage and a liability, conserving energy mattered. Not all scientists agree that the neck was strictly for eating. Some suggest it might have played a role in social behaviour. Perhaps males displayed their long necks in slow, graceful arcs to impress potential mates or intimidate rivals. Others have speculated that they might have used them to reach water sources or even to browse low-growing plants without bending their legs, simply by curving the neck downward. It is a reminder that in paleontology, every feature can have more than one purpose. The sheer height of Mamenchisaurus also had its challenges. Pumping blood all the way up that long neck to its head would have required a powerful heart and specialised blood pressure regulation, much like what we see in modern giraffes, but on a far grander scale. We do not know exactly how their circulatory system managed the task, but the fact that they thrived for millions of years suggests they had it worked out rather well. Despite their massive size, these sauropods likely moved at a slow, steady pace, much like elephants today. The ground would have trembled slightly under their weight, and their long tails may have swung gently behind them, acting as a counterbalance. Life for Mamenchisaurus was probably unhurried. Eat, digest, move on, repeat. Yet their size would not have made them invulnerable. Predators like Allosaurus roamed the same landscapes, and a young or injured Mamenchisaurus might have been vulnerable if separated from the herd. Being part of a group may have offered safety. Herd behaviour is suggested for many sauropods, and it is easy to imagine lines of these long-necked giants moving slowly across a sunlit plain, their heads rising and falling like ships on a calm sea. The sight would have been both majestic and faintly surreal, a living demonstration of how far evolution could stretch the basic dinosaur blueprint. In the grand tapestry of prehistoric life, Mamenchisaurus stands out as a masterpiece of specialization. Its neck was not just an appendage, it was a defining statement of its place in the ecosystem, a tool that opened up food sources inaccessible to others and perhaps played a role in social interaction as well. Even today, when all that remains are stone bones and careful reconstructions, it is hard not to be impressed by the sheer audacity of its design. Some dinosaurs were strange because of horns or armour or feathers. Mamenchisaurus was strange because it took one idea, let's make the neck longer, and followed it to the absolute extreme. It is proof that sometimes nature's experiments are bold, impractical seeming, and yet entirely successful. You can almost imagine the gentle sway of that impossibly long neck, above the tree line, a silhouette against the warm Jurassic sky. As the rest of the world bustled far below, imagine wandering through the late Cretaceous landscape, where flowering plants have begun to spread across the land and herds of herbivorous dinosaurs graze in the warm afternoon sun. Among them is a creature that, at first glance, does not look too different from other bipedal plant eaters. It stands on strong hind legs, with short arms tucked in close to its body, a stiff tail for balance, and a beaked mouth for cropping vegetation. But then you notice the head, a rounded dome of solid bone gleaming slightly in the sunlight. This is Pachycephalosaurus, one of the strangest dinosaurs to ever walk the earth, and that dome is the reason why. Pachycephalosaurus is best known for its thick skull roof, which could measure up to 10 inches in thickness. This dome was made of dense bone, arched over the brain like a helmet. Around the edges, small bony knobs and short spikes added a little extra ornamentation, giving the head a somewhat medieval look. In life, these dinosaurs were about 15 feet long from nose to tail, making them the largest known members of their dome-headed family, the Pachycephalosaurids. For decades, paleontologists have debated what this strange cranial feature was for. The most popular idea, and the one that tends to capture people's imaginations, is that Pachycephalosaurus used its head like a battering ram, charging forward and colliding dome to dome with rivals in contests over territory or mates. It is an image that draws easy comparisons to modern bighorn sheep, whose dramatic head-butting displays can be heard echoing across mountain slopes. However, when researchers began to study the biomechanics of Pachycephalosaurus skulls more closely, the story became less straightforward. While the bone was thick, the shape of the skull and the anatomy of the neck may not have been perfectly suited for repeated high-impact headbutting. Some scientists suggested that the domes may have been used in flank butting instead, ramming into the sides of opponents rather than colliding head-on. This could still have been an impressive display of strength without the same risk of injury to the brain and neck. Other researchers have proposed that the dome was primarily a display structure, used to attract mates or signal social dominance. In this view, the size and curvature of the dome might have been a visual cue to others in the herd, a way of saying, "I am strong, healthy, and worth paying attention to." The small knobs and spikes around the dome's edge could have been accentuated with bright skin colours in life, turning the head into a billboard of status and health. One intriguing piece of evidence comes from studying the fossilised domes themselves. In some specimens, paleontologists have found signs of injury and healing, suggesting that these animals did sometimes collide with something, perhaps each other. These healed lesions imply that while head impacts may not have been their primary lifestyle, they were certainly within the realm of possibility. Pachycephalosaurus also had an unusual set of teeth and jaws for a herbivore. The front of the mouth featured a beak for snipping vegetation, while the back contained small leaf-shaped teeth for processing it. This suggests a diet of leaves, fruits, and possibly seeds, which would have been plentiful in the lush late Cretaceous environments of North America. Its stiff, muscular tail would have helped counterbalance the head during movement, and possibly during whatever head-related activities it engaged in. The name Pachycephalosaurus translates to thick-headed lizard, which is wonderfully literal. But in life, this dinosaur was not just a walking skull. Its body was built for agility, with strong hind limbs for quick bursts of speed. This would have been useful for escaping predators like Tyrannosaurus rex, or the fast pack-hunting dromaeosaurs that shared its habitat. It is also worth noting that Pachycephalosaurus is known from relatively incomplete fossils. Much of what we know about it comes from isolated skulls or skull fragments. For a long time, paleontologists puzzled over whether smaller, flat-headed Pachycephalosaurs were actually separate species, or simply younger individuals whose domes had not yet fully grown. Studies of bone microstructure now suggest that these flat-headed forms were indeed juveniles, and that the dome developed and thickened as the animal matured, much like antlers in deer grow larger and more elaborate with age. This growth pattern ties neatly into the idea of the dome being a display structure. A young Pachycephalosaurus, still developing its dome, may have had little to gain from physical combat, and instead stayed on the edges of social contests, growing into its role as it aged. By adulthood, the fully developed dome could have served as both a visual signal and a functional tool in whatever form of competition they engaged in. In the broader context of dinosaur evolution, Pachycephalosaurus represents one of those experiments in anatomy that seems almost whimsical. While other plant-eating dinosaurs evolved horns, frills, or armor plates, this lineage went for a helmet. Whether for fighting, flirting, or simply looking impressive, the dome was their defining feature, and it remains one of the more distinctive adaptations in the dinosaur world. Even now, the true purpose of that thick skull remains a subject of debate, and perhaps that is part of its charm. It is a reminder that prehistoric life was not just a parade of toothy predators and lumbering giants, but also a collection of species that tried out all sorts of unusual strategies for living. Pachycephalosaurus may not have been the biggest or the fiercest dinosaur, but it was certainly one of the most distinctive, a creature whose head alone still sparks curiosity more than 70 million years after it disappeared from the Earth. If you were to meet Therizinosaurus for the first time without any warning, you might assume you had stumbled into the middle of a very bad day. Standing up to 33 feet long, with a long neck, a hulking potbelly and arms that ended in 3 of the longest claws ever carried by a land animal, it would be easy to think you were looking at a predator of nightmarish proportions. Those claws alone could reach over 3 feet in length, long curved scythes that glinted menacingly in the Cretaceous sunlight, and yet, despite its fearsome appearance, Therizinosaurus was not out to eat you. It was, in fact, a plant-eater. This contradiction, looking like a monster but living like a gentle giant, is part of what makes Therizinosaurus so fascinating. Its claws were not meant for tearing into flesh, but for pulling down vegetation, stripping branches and perhaps even gathering fruit. It belonged to a strange group of theropods called Therizinosaurs, which were close relatives of predatory dinosaurs like Velociraptor and Tyrannosaurus rex, but had taken a dramatically different evolutionary path. Where most of their kin went in for teeth and speed, Therizinosaurs slowed down, broadened out, and adopted a leaf-based diet. Therizinosaurus lived around 70 million years ago in what is now Mongolia, an area that at the time was a patchwork of forests, floodplains and river channels. Its long neck gave it access to leaves and branches well above the reach of smaller herbivores, while its broad, barrel-shaped body housed an enormous digestive system for processing tough plant matter. Like other plant-eaters, it probably swallowed its food with minimal chewing, relying on fermentation in its gut to do the heavy lifting. Those claws, while primarily feeding tools, were likely multifunctional. They could have been used for defense, slashing at predators that got too close. A swipe from a claw that size could have been devastating, even without the sharpness of a carnivore's talons. Some scientists also suggest they may have been useful for pulling themselves upright against tree trunks or dragging down particularly stubborn branches. The idea of a 30-foot dinosaur delicately plucking leaves with claws the size of swords is both slightly absurd and oddly endearing. Its head, in contrast to its impressive arms, was small and ended in a toothless beak. This beak would have been ideal for cropping foliage with precision. Behind it, a few small teeth may have lingered in the jaw, but they were not the main tools of its trade. Combined with its long neck and low-slung body, the overall look was unlike anything else in the dinosaur world, a mix of predator-like features and unmistakably herbivorous adaptations. Therizinosaurus also carried feathers. Fossil evidence from related species shows that these dinosaurs had a covering of simple, hair-like feathers over much of their bodies. These would not have been for flight, but could have provided insulation, helped with display, or even served as a way to protect eggs during nesting. The combination of feathers, enormous claws, and a rotund body gives Therizinosaurus one of the most peculiar silhouettes in prehistory. When it was first discovered in the mid-20th century, Therizinosaurus caused a great deal of confusion. Only the claws were found at first, and paleontologists assumed they belonged to a giant turtle-like creature. It was only later, as more of the skeleton came to light, that scientists realized they were dealing with a truly unique dinosaur. Even now, complete skeletons are rare, and much of what we know comes from comparing its bones to those of smaller, better-known Therizinosaurs. Its slow, deliberate lifestyle would have set it apart from the more restless, fleet-footed dinosaurs of its time. Rather than chasing prey or constantly moving in search of food, Therizinosaurus could feed for long stretches in one area, before ambling to the next grove. Its long arms gave it reach in multiple directions, allowing it to gather a variety of plants without having to reposition its entire bulk. This efficiency may have been one of its key survival strategies. Social behaviour in Therizinosaurus is still a mystery. Some reconstructions imagine them moving in loose groups, perhaps females gathering in nesting areas, and males displaying their feathers and claws in mating rituals. The claws could have been impressive visual signals as well as practical tools, much like a peacock's tail, but considerably more dangerous looking. If that was the case, then what looks to us like a terrifying weapon might have been, to another Therizinosaurus a charming romantic flourish. Predators would have thought twice before attacking one. While its size alone would have been a deterrent to many, large carnivores like Tarbosaurus still roamed the same regions. In those cases, a defensive posture, with arms raised and claws sweeping, could have made even the hungriest hunter hesitate. Sometimes, appearance really is everything. Therizinosaurus stands as a reminder that evolution does not follow a straight line. A lineage of sharp-toothed hunters took an unexpected turn, abandoning the chase for the slower work of leaf-pulling and seed-gathering, while keeping some of the most intimidating hardware in the business. It is a creature that defies easy categorization, a herbivore wearing a predator's frame, a gentle forager with the arms of a monster. In life, it must have been an impressive sight, its long claws curling as it reached for leaves, feathers catching the sun, and its pot belly swaying with each slow step. The more we learn about it, the more it feels like one of nature's great experiments. Proof that sometimes the most extraordinary designs come from blending the unexpected. In the warm, lush lowlands of the late Cretaceous, a herd of duck-billed dinosaurs grazes among ferns and flowering plants. They are large, peaceful animals, their long tails sweeping the ground as they move slowly from patch to patch. But one among them stands out, not because of its size, but because of the striking crest that rises from the back of its head, curving elegantly upward and backward like an ornate horn. This is Parasaurolophus, one of the most distinctive hadrosaurs, and its headgear has fascinated paleontologists for nearly a century. Parasaurolophus belonged to a family of plant-eating dinosaurs known as hadrosaurids, the duck bills, named for their broad, flattened snouts. They were among the most successful herbivores of the Cretaceous, thriving in large herds across North America and parts of Asia. But where most of their relatives sported only modest crests or none at all, Parasaurolophus carried a crest that could reach over 6 feet in length, making it one of the most elaborate cranial ornaments in the dinosaur world. The most intriguing thing about this crest is not just its size or shape, but what was inside it. CT scans of fossil skulls have revealed a complex network of hollow tubes running through the crest, connected to the nasal passages. This unusual anatomy led scientists to one of the most compelling theories about Parasaurolophus, that the crest functioned like a built-in musical instrument. According to this idea, the dinosaur could push air from its lungs through these tubes, producing deep, resonant calls that could carry over long distances. Each individual's crest was slightly different in shape and size, meaning that the tone of its call might have been unique, much like how no two brass instruments sound exactly the same. These sounds could have been used to communicate within the herd, to warn of predators, or to attract mates. Some reconstructions suggest their calls would have been low, haunting notes that rolled across the ancient floodplains like the sound of a ship's horn. There is also evidence that the crest's role may have been partly visual. In life, Parasaurolophus may have had brightly coloured skin stretched over its crest, making it stand out during displays. A combination of visual and auditory signals would have been especially effective. A flash of colour paired with a distinctive call could convey a lot of information very quickly. The size and shape of the crest also changed as the dinosaur grew. Juveniles had much smaller crests, which gradually elongated as they matured. This suggests that the crest played an important role in adult life, possibly in mate selection or social hierarchy. A fully grown adult with a large symmetrical crest and a strong resonant call might have been particularly impressive to potential partners. Parasaurolophus was a large animal in its own right, measuring around 30 feet from nose to tail. It could move on both 2 legs and 4, depending on whether it was grazing or on the move. Its teeth were arranged in dense dental batteries, capable of grinding tough plant material with remarkable efficiency. Like other hadrosaurs, it likely fed on a variety of vegetation, from low-growing ferns to higher branches that it could reach by rearing up on its hind legs. Its lifestyle would have revolved around the safety of the herd. Large groups offered protection from predators such as tyrannosaurs, which were a constant threat in the same ecosystems. The crest's potential role in communication would have been especially useful in this context. a way to coordinate movement, signal danger, or keep contact when the herd spread out while feeding. In a landscape of tall plants and dense vegetation, sound could travel where sight could not. The discovery of Parasaurolophus fossils in different parts of North America has also revealed that there were several species, each with slightly different crest shapes. This variation supports the idea that the crest's form was under selective pressure for social or reproductive reasons, with each species developing its own style of crest and, perhaps, its own distinctive call. While the musical crest theory is the most famous, it is not the only idea. Some researchers have suggested that the crest might have helped regulate body temperature, acting like a radiator by exposing a large surface area of blood vessels to the air. Others have proposed that it may have enhanced the dinosaur's sense of smell by increasing the area of its nasal passages. It is possible that the crest served multiple purposes at once, combining practical functions with social signalling. After all, evolution often finds ways to get more than one use out of a single feature. The first Parasaurolophus fossils were described in the 1920s, and from the start the crest drew immediate attention. Early reconstructions sometimes showed it pointing forward, like a bizarre unicorn horn, before better fossil evidence clarified its backward sweep. Since then, it has become one of the most iconic dinosaurs in popular culture, instantly recognizable by its silhouette alone. In many ways, Parasaurolophus challenges the old image of dinosaurs as purely utilitarian creatures, built only for survival. Its crest, while it may have had practical uses, seems to have also been shaped by the forces of communication, display, and social interaction, things we often associate more with birds and mammals. This makes sense, given that hadrosaurs were part of the same great evolutionary tree that eventually gave rise to birds. It is easy to imagine a herd of Parasaurolophus on a quiet morning, mist still clinging to the ferns, their heads rising above the vegetation, as a low, mournful note rolls through the air. One answers from the distance, then another, until the sound becomes a chorus, each call slightly different but blending into a single, resonant voice. For us, it is only a reconstruction, an educated guess based on bone and theory. But in their world, it would have been as real and familiar as the calls of geese over a lake. Parasaurolophus shows us that the age of dinosaurs was not silent. It was a world of calls, signals, and perhaps even music, carried not by instruments crafted by hand, but by the very bones of the creatures themselves. It is a reminder that even in deep time, life found ways to speak and to be heard. In the closing chapter of the Age of Dinosaurs, while predators like Tyrannosaurus rex prowled the forests and floodplains of late Cretaceous North America, there was one herbivore that didn't run from trouble. It stood its ground. Ankylosaurus was the prehistoric equivalent of a living fortress, a creature so heavily defended that it looked as though it had been designed by an ancient blacksmith with a fondness for over-engineering. Measuring over 20 feet in length and weighing close to 8 tons, Ankylosaurus was built low and wide, with a body shape that hugged the ground. Every inch of its back, neck, and even parts of its tail was covered in thick, bony plates called osteoderms. These plates were embedded in the skin, much like the armour of modern crocodiles, but in Ankylosaurus they were larger, thicker, and arranged in neat rows that formed an unbroken shield. Many were also topped with knobs or spikes, making any attempt to bite down on them a deeply unpleasant experience for a predator. Its head, too, was armoured. The skull was a solid helmet of bone, with small horns projecting from the back and sides. Even its eyelids were protected by bony plates, giving it a permanent expression of wary determination. This was not an animal built for speed or stealth. It was built to endure. And yet, the most famous feature of Ankylosaurus lay at the end of its tail, a massive bony club, formed from fused vertebrae and covered in thick, solid bone. This tail club could be swung with enough force to break the leg of a large predator. Imagine the sheer physics of it. Several hundred pounds of muscle driving a solid mass of bone into whatever was foolish enough to get too close. Fossil evidence shows that some theropods carried healed leg fractures that could well have been the result of an encounter with an ankylosaur's tail. This defensive arsenal meant Ankylosaurus could afford a lifestyle that was almost leisurely. It likely spent much of its time foraging for low-growing plants, sweeping its beak-shaped mouth across ferns, cycads, and other ground-level vegetation. Its teeth were small and leaf-shaped, ideal for cropping and shredding rather than chewing thoroughly. Digestion probably relied heavily on fermentation, with a large gut breaking down the tough plant fibres over time. Given its size and armour, Ankylosaurus had few natural predators willing to take the risk. Tyrannosaurus rex might have been capable of killing one, but even for the apex predator of its day, the potential injuries from a defensive swing could outweigh the reward. Most attackers would likely have looked elsewhere for an easier meal. Despite its intimidating hardware, Ankylosaurus was not invulnerable. A well-placed bite to the soft underbelly or flanks could be deadly, and juveniles without fully developed armour would have been much more vulnerable. Herd behaviour might have helped, with multiple individuals standing together to present a united wall of defence. The placement and shape of the osteoderms varied across its body, and some were even keeled, giving a ridged texture that would have caught the sunlight in strange patterns. In life, these plates may have been covered with keratin, the same material that makes up horns and fingernails, which could have given them a smooth, polished surface. While the primary function was defence, some paleontologists have speculated that these features might also have had a role in display, perhaps helping individuals recognise each other or signal health and strength. The tail club itself may not have been used constantly. Swinging such a heavy weapon took energy, and in many cases the mere sight of it could have been enough to discourage an attack. Much like modern animals with impressive defensive features, think of a porcupine's quills or a muskox's horns, the point was to avoid a fight whenever possible. The club was the last line of defence, deployed only when intimidation failed. Ankylosaurus's sensory abilities were also worth noting. Its wide-set eyes would have provided a good field of vision, important for spotting approaching predators. The nostrils were large and the nasal passages unusually complex, possibly improving its sense of smell or helping to regulate temperature. There is even a theory that the convoluted nasal passages could have allowed for low-pitched sounds, though this idea remains speculative. It is easy to imagine Ankylosaurus moving through its late Cretaceous world, head low, tail sweeping behind, as the earth trembled faintly under its weight. The vegetation would have parted for its broad frame, the sunlight flickering across its armoured back. Predators might watch from a distance, weighing their options, before deciding that perhaps a different target would be wiser. Fossils of Ankylosaurus remain relatively rare compared to other dinosaurs of its time, which adds to its mystique. Much of what we know comes from piecing together evidence from related ankylosaurs and a few well-preserved specimens. This scarcity is partly due to the heavy nature of its body. When it died, its carcass may not have been easily moved by water or scavengers, leading to a lower chance of burial and fossilization. What makes Ankylosaurus so compelling is how perfectly it represents the idea of defense as an evolutionary strategy. It did not need speed, agility, or camouflage. Instead, it invested heavily in armor and weaponry, becoming a creature that could stand its ground against almost anything. It is a reminder that in the arms race of survival, there are many paths to success, and some involve simply making yourself too much trouble to bother with. Even in the world of dinosaurs filled with teeth, claws, and horns, Ankylosaurus managed to be memorable without relying on aggression. It was a slow-moving, plant-eating giant that nonetheless inspired caution in the deadliest hunters of its time. There is something quietly admirable about that, a creature that did not go looking for a fight, but was more than ready if one came its way. In the vast, open landscapes of late Cretaceous Mongolia, speed could mean the difference between life and death. Here, where there was little cover from predators and the horizon seemed to stretch endlessly, lived a dinosaur built for running, long-legged, lightweight, and with the kind of streamlined body that seemed to beg for a chase. This was Gallimimus, often nicknamed the ostrich mimic, a title it earned for good reason. With its slender bill, toothless beak and long neck, Gallimimus bore a striking resemblance to modern flightless birds, and like them, it was made for speed. Gallimimus was not a small animal. Adults could reach lengths of around 20 feet from head to tail, and though lightly built, they would have weighed several hundred kilograms. Its long hind legs ended in three-toed feet, perfect for fast, efficient strides across open ground. The proportions of its limb bone suggest that Gallimimus could have reached speeds of up to 35 miles per hour, making it one of the fastest dinosaurs known. That is roughly the top speed of an ostrich today, and in the world of giant predators, it was a critical survival skill. The body plan of Gallimimus was all about efficiency. Its tail acted as a counterbalance to its forward-leaning posture, while its lightweight skeleton reduced the energy needed to accelerate. The neck was long and flexible, topped by a small head with a toothless beak. Despite its bird-like appearance, Gallimimus was very much a dinosaur, part of a group called ornithomimosaurs, meaning bird mimics. These dinosaurs had evolved a convergent body form to modern ostriches and emus, even though they were separated by tens of millions of years of evolution. One of the enduring mysteries about Gallimimus is its diet. Without teeth, it clearly was not adapted to tearing meat or grinding tough plants. Some paleontologists believe it was an omnivore, snapping up small animals, insects, and soft plants. The beak may have been adapted for plucking, and its long arms and clawed hands could have been used to grasp food. There is also the possibility that Gallimimus fed on seeds, fruits, and other easily digestible plant material, much like some modern birds. Another intriguing idea is that Gallimimus may have been a filter feeder of sorts, scooping up mouthfuls of sediment and sifting out edible matter, a strategy somewhat like that of ducks. The inside of its beak appears to have had ridges that could have helped with such a task, though whether this was its main feeding method or just part of a more varied diet is still debated. In any case, its diet was likely opportunistic, taking advantage of whatever was most readily available in its environment. Gallimimus fossils were first discovered in the Gobi Desert in the 1960s during joint expeditions by Mongolian and Polish scientists. The arid, windswept region where its remains were found was once a very different place, dotted with rivers, lakes, and patches of forest. It shared its home with other dinosaurs such as Velociraptor, Protoceratops, and the giant predator Tarbosaurus. In such company, speed and awareness would have been vital. Its large eyes suggest that Gallimimus had excellent vision, which would have helped in spotting predators from a distance. Combined with its speed, this meant that it could likely outrun most threats, darting across the open plains in a blur of movement. Living in groups may have added to its safety. A herd of Gallimimus would have been harder for predators to single out, and multiple sets of eyes could watch for danger. The long, slender arms of Gallimimus are another curious feature. While they were not suited for flight, they may have been useful in feeding, or possibly in mating displays. Fossils of related species show evidence of simple feathers, suggesting that Gallimimus may have had a feather covering as well. If so, the feathers could have been used for display or for regulating body temperature. In a fast-moving, high-metabolism animal, staying warm or cool at the right times would have been important. Its social behaviour, while not directly preserved in the fossil record, can be inferred from the discovery of multiple individuals together. Ornithomimosaurs in general seem to have been social, and there is a certain logic to the idea of Gallimimus moving in coordinated groups across the open country. The image of dozens of these long-legged dinosaurs running together, necks stretched forward, tails streaming behind, is one of the most dynamic scenes one can imagine from the Cretaceous. While Gallimimus is often remembered for its cameo in popular culture, where it famously outruns much slower predators, the real animal was even more remarkable. It was not just fast, it was a product of millions of years of refinement, a design that balanced speed, awareness, and adaptability. Its success lay not in overpowering its rivals, but in simply staying ahead of them, using the open spaces to its advantage. In the end, Gallimimus reminds us that in the age of dinosaurs, survival did not always belong to the largest or the most heavily armed. Sometimes, it belonged to the ones that could vanish over the horizon before danger had even closed the distance. It is a lesson written in bone and in the long, elegant lines of a creature that mastered the art of running for its life, and when the coast was clear, running simply because it could. In the early Cretaceous forests of what is now northeastern China, the air was alive with more than just the sounds of insects and the rustle of leaves. Among the branches, a small dinosaur prepared for an unusual journey. Not on foot, but through the air. Microraptor, scarcely larger than a crow, was one of the strangest flyers, or perhaps more accurately gliders, to ever exist. What made it truly remarkable was that it did not just have wings on its arms, it had them on its legs as well, making it a genuine four-winged dinosaur. Microraptor was part of the Dromaeosaur family, the same broader group that includes Velociraptor. But while its more famous relatives were ground-based predators, Microraptor spent much of its life among the trees. Its body was covered in sleek feathers, including long flight feathers on both its forelimbs and hind limbs. These leg feathers were not just decorative, they were aerodynamic surfaces, forming a second set of wings. When stretched out, Microraptor's silhouette must have looked like something between a bird, a bat, and a dragonfly. Fossils of Microraptor are so exquisitely preserved that even the arrangement of its feathers is visible. This exceptional detail comes from the fossil beds of Liaoning Province, a region famous for capturing the delicate remains of early birds and feathered dinosaurs in fine-grained volcanic ash. These fossils show that Microraptor's feathers were asymmetrical, a key feature of flight feathers, which generate lift and allow for controlled movement through the air. Exactly how Microraptor used its four wings has been the subject of much scientific debate. One leading theory is that it launched itself from tree branches and glided to another, using its hind wings to increase lift and stability. Another possibility is that it used a steep, controlled descent to pounce on prey below. In both cases, the hind wings would have played a crucial role in helping it steer and slow its fall. While it may not have been a powerful flyer like modern birds, it seems to have been an accomplished glider, making the most of the vertical world of the forest. Microraptor's diet was just as varied as its aerial abilities. Fossil evidence has revealed stomach contents that include small mammals, lizards, and even fish. Yes, fish, suggesting that it was capable of swooping down to snatch prey from the water's surface. This versatility hints at an opportunistic hunter, able to adapt its feeding strategy to whatever was available. In a dense, competitive ecosystem, such adaptability would have been a major advantage. Its size was modest, about 2.5 feet from nose to tail, but its tail was long and stiff, tipped with a diamond-shaped fan of feathers. This tail fan may have acted like a rudder, helping Microraptor stay stable during glides. The long tail also links it to its Dromaeosaur relatives, many of which use similar tails for balance during running or pouncing. The discovery of Microraptor in the early 2000s was a landmark moment in understanding the relationship between dinosaurs and birds. Here was an animal that was clearly a dinosaur, with teeth, claws, and a long bony tail, but also equipped with fully developed flight feathers. It showed that the evolutionary experiments leading to powered flight were varied and complex, and that some lineages took unexpected paths before vanishing. Its iridescent feathers add another fascinating detail. Studies of microscopic pigment structures called melanosomes, preserved in Microraptor fossils, suggest that its feathers were glossy black with a bluish sheen similar to modern crows or grackles. In the dappled light of the forest canopy, such plumage might have provided both camouflage and an element of display. The idea of this tiny four-winged dinosaur shimmering in the sunlight as it glided from branch to branch is hard to resist. Microraptor's claws were curved and sharp, ideal for gripping branches or clambering up tree trunks. Combined with its feathered limbs, This suggests a creature equally at home in the trees and the air. On the ground, it may have moved awkwardly due to the feathers on its legs, but in the canopy, those same feathers would have been invaluable. Some researchers have proposed that Microraptor's gliding abilities could have been a transitional stage in the evolution of flight. In this view, dinosaurs like Microraptor represent experiments in aerial locomotion. Not quite birds, but far more than simple ground dwellers. It is even possible that multiple dinosaur lineages developed some form of gliding or flight independently, each using slightly different anatomical solutions. What is certain is that Microraptor's combination of features makes it one of the most visually striking dinosaurs ever discovered. It was not the largest, the fiercest, or the most heavily armed, but it was uniquely adapted to a lifestyle that blended climbing, gliding, and opportunistic hunting. In a world dominated by much larger dinosaurs, Microraptor thrived by making use of a niche that few others could exploit. Its fossils also carry an almost poetic quality. This tiny dinosaur, preserved so perfectly that the outline of its feathers is still visible after more than 100 million years, offers a direct glimpse into a moment in deep time. It is a reminder that evolution does not work in straight lines, and that some of its most beautiful creations were fleeting, vanishing long before humans ever walked the earth. Picture it now, a quiet forest, the air warm and still. In the canopy above, a flash of iridescent black as a small four-winged creature leaps from a branch. It tilts its limbs just so, catching the air, and for a few seconds it is neither falling nor flying, but simply gliding, a whisper of motion between the trees. In that moment, Microraptor ruled its world, not with brute strength, but with the elegance of a glide perfectly executed. In the world of paleontology, there are few mysteries quite as enduring as the one that began in 1965 in the Gobi Desert. A team of scientists unearthed a pair of enormous arms, each over 8 feet long, with claws as big as steak knives. The rest of the skeleton was missing. No skull, no body, just those arms and some shoulder bones. The animal they belonged to was given the name Deinocheirus, meaning terrible hand, and for decades that was almost all we knew. The scientific community, and anyone with a vivid imagination, was left to wonder what kind of creature had wielded such intimidating limbs. Speculation ran wild. Some imagined a giant predatory dinosaur, a supersized cousin of Velociraptor capable of tearing apart even the largest prey. Others thought it might be a massive scavenger or a strange kind of fish-eater. With only the arms to go on, the possibilities seemed endless. For nearly 50 years, Deinocheirus was a ghost, known only from its terrifying reach. That changed in the early 21st century when new fossil discoveries finally revealed the rest of the animal. And the truth was stranger than anyone expected. Far from being a sleek, deadly hunter, Deinocheirus turned out to be a bulky, humpbacked, duck-billed omnivore, a combination so odd that it looked like several different dinosaurs stitched together. Fully grown, Deinocheirus was an absolute giant among its kind, reaching lengths of over 35 feet and weighing several tons. It belonged to a group called Ornithomimosaurs, the ostrich mimics, which were generally lightweight, fast-running dinosaurs. Deinocheirus broke that mold completely. It had the basic body plan of an ornithomimosaur, but scaled up and heavily modified. Instead of speed, it carried bulk. Instead of a sleek silhouette, it had a deep, heavy body and a distinctive hump formed by long neural spines along its back. The skull was perhaps the biggest surprise. Rather than the toothy jaws some had imagined, Deinocheirus had a broad, flat, toothless beak, somewhat like that of a duck. Its lower jaw flared out at the sides, giving it a wide mouth that would have been ideal for scooping up vegetation or sifting through muddy water. Inside the beak, the surface was lined with grooves that may have helped it grip slippery prey such as fish, lending support to the idea that it was an omnivore. Its environment during the late Cretaceous was a river-dominated landscape in what is now Mongolia. Fossil evidence suggests that Deinocheirus spent much of its time near water, feeding on plants growing along riverbanks as well as fish and invertebrates. Stomach contents from one specimen even contained fish remains, confirming that this giant was not strictly a herbivore. The hump on its back remains a subject of discussion. The tall neural spines could have supported a fatty hump or a sail-like structure. This may have been used for storing energy reserves, regulating temperature, or for display purposes. Whatever the exact function, the hump gave Deinocheirus a profile unlike any other dinosaur. Then there were those famous arms. In life, they would have been covered in muscle, giving the animal incredible strength. The hands ended in blunt claws, better suited for digging or pulling vegetation than for slashing. Some scientists think Deinocheirus may have used its arms to rake aquatic plants toward its mouth or to dig for roots. The claws could also have been a useful deterrent to any predator foolish enough to get too close. Despite its size and odd build, Deinocheirus was not without threats. Tarbosaurus, a close relative of Tyrannosaurus rex, lived in the same region and would have posed a danger, particularly to juveniles. However, an adult Deinocheirus, standing tall with its massive arms spread wide, would have been a formidable opponent to approach. The rediscovery of Deinocheirus in full form came thanks to a dramatic twist. Some crucial fossil material had been looted from Mongolia and ended up in private collections, while other parts of the skeleton remained in museum storage. Eventually, through careful scientific collaboration and a bit of detective work, the missing pieces were reunited. This allowed paleontologists to finally reconstruct the entire animal, solving one of the longest-running dinosaur puzzles in history. The result was an animal that defied expectations at every turn. The powerful arms, once thought to belong to a fearsome predator, were part of a slow-moving, semi-aquatic giant. The duck-billed skull, reminiscent of a hadrosaur, was attached to the body of an oversized ornithomimosaur, and the hump gave it a silhouette unlike anything else from the Cretaceous. Its discovery highlights a lesson often repeated in paleontology. Appearances, especially partial ones, can be deceiving. The fossil record is full of surprises, and even the most fearsome-looking parts can turn out to belong to gentle giants. Deinocheirus may not have been a lightning-fast hunter, but it was a highly successful, well-adapted omnivore in its riverside world. Today, when we picture it in full, we can imagine it wading through shallow water, its long arms sweeping vegetation toward its wide beak. The hump rises above its back like a natural sail, catching the light of the Cretaceous sun. It moves slowly but confidently, perfectly at home in the wetlands that sustained it. And somewhere in the background, the echo of that old mystery still lingers. The decades when all we knew were those terrible hands, and the rest of the story waited patiently beneath the sand. In the river systems of Cretaceous North Africa, where the waterways wound through lush floodplains and teemed with giant fish, there lived a predator unlike any other. Spinosaurus was a dinosaur that seemed to have been assembled from parts borrowed from multiple worlds. A crocodile's long, narrow snout, the towering sail of a reptilian showpiece, the body of a deep-chested hunter, and the habits of a semi-aquatic ambush predator. It remains one of the most distinctive and debated dinosaurs ever discovered. Spinosaurus was truly enormous. Estimates put it at over 50 feet in length, possibly making it the largest predatory dinosaur to ever walk the earth, longer even than Tyrannosaurus rex. But where T-Rex was a land-dwelling powerhouse, Spinosaurus was adapted for life in and around the water. Its crocodile-like skull was filled with conical teeth, perfect for gripping slippery prey rather than slicing through flesh. Many of these teeth lacked serrations, another clue that its diet focused heavily on fish. The jaws were long and narrow, with nostrils placed farther back on the snout, allowing the animal to breathe while most of its head was submerged, much like a modern crocodile. Its body also bore other aquatic adaptations. Fossil evidence suggests that Spinosaurus had relatively short hind limbs compared to other large theropods, along with a long, powerful tail shaped more like that of a newt or crocodile. This tail could have been used to propel the dinosaur through the water with side-to-side strokes. Some studies have even proposed that Spinosaurus spent the majority of its time swimming and hunting in rivers, perhaps clambering onto land only occasionally. The most famous feature of Spinosaurus, however, was the massive sail rising from its back. Formed by elongated neural spines, some over 5 feet long, it created a striking profile that must have been visible even from a distance. The function of this sail is still debated. One idea is that it was a display structure used to impress mates or intimidate rivals. Brightly coloured skin stretched over the spines could have made it an effective visual signal in the murky vegetation-lined rivers where Spinosaurus lived. Another theory suggests the sail may have helped regulate body temperature. By absorbing heat from the sun in the morning or releasing excess heat in the afternoon, it could have helped this giant maintain its body temperature more efficiently. Still others propose that the sail may have played a role in swimming, perhaps acting as a stabilizer or even a lure to attract fish. The truth could be a combination of several functions, as is often the case in evolution. The environment of Spinosaurus was a predator's paradise, though not without competition. It shared its waterways with enormous fish, such as the 3-foot-toothed sawfish Onchopristis, as well as other large predators like the giant crocodile Sarcosuchus. On land, it would have encountered other massive theropods such as Carcharodontosaurus, but by focusing on an aquatic lifestyle, Spinosaurus may have avoided direct competition, carving out a niche that few other dinosaurs could exploit. Its forelimbs were strong and equipped with large claws, which may have been useful for grabbing struggling prey or hauling itself onto riverbanks. The combination of claws, jaws and size meant that very little in its environment was truly safe from it. While fish probably made up the bulk of its diet, it may also have scavenged carcasses or preyed on smaller dinosaurs that came too close to the water's edge. Spinosaurus has a long history of scientific intrigue. The first fossils were discovered in Egypt in the early 20th century by German paleontologist Ernst Stromer. Tragically, these fossils were destroyed during World War II, leaving only descriptions and photographs. For decades afterward, Spinosaurus was known largely from fragments and speculation. It wasn't until the 21st century that new discoveries in Morocco began to fill in the picture, revealing its shortened hind legs, elongated tail, and other adaptations for an aquatic lifestyle. These new findings have sparked lively debate among paleontologists. Was Spinosaurus a fully aquatic pursuit predator, chasing down prey beneath the water like a giant reptilian otter? Or was it more of a wading ambush hunter standing in shallows and snapping up passing fish, like a heron on a colossal scale? Different reconstructions paint very different pictures, and ongoing research continues to refine our understanding. What is certain is that Spinosaurus was a specialist. Its body was not built for the bone-crunching land-based combat of Tyrannosaurus, nor for high-speed chases across open ground. Instead, it was shaped by the demands of the river, to swim, to strike, and to dominate the watery world it inhabited. In doing so, it became a predator that blurred the line between dinosaur and crocodile, in both form and function. Visualizing Spinosaurus in life is an exercise in both awe and imagination. Picture a broad, slow-moving river under a Cretaceous sun. The surface ripples as a massive shadow glides beneath, tail sweeping powerfully, the long sails slicing through the water like the fin of some ancient sea monster. It tilts its head, eyes fixed on a school of fish, and then surges upward, jaws snapping shut with a spray of water. For a moment, the river belongs entirely to it. Even in an age filled with strange and specialized creatures, Spinosaurus stands out as a masterpiece of adaptation. It was a hunter that left solid ground behind and embraced the water, evolving into a form no other large theropod matched. Its sail, its crocodile-like skull, its powerful tail, each was a piece of a puzzle that fit perfectly into its riverine world. And though its true lifestyle may never be known in every detail, Spinosaurus reminds us that the age of dinosaurs was as much about diversity as it was about size or strength. In the great story of prehistoric life, this sail-backed predator carved out a chapter all its own. High above the late Cretaceous landscapes of North America, the skies were ruled by creatures so vast and improbable that even the largest birds alive today would have looked like sparrows beside them. These were the giant pterosaurs, flying reptiles that shared the world with dinosaurs but belonged to a separate branch of the reptile family tree. Among them, two names stand out: Quetzalcoatlus and Cryolophosaurus, colossal aerial predators that stretched the limits of what flight could achieve. Quetzalcoatlus is perhaps the more famous of the pair, named after the feathered serpent god of Aztec mythology. With a wingspan estimated at up to 35 feet, it was the largest known flying animal of all time. Imagine a creature with the wingspan of a small aircraft, yet light enough to take off and soar through the air. Its bones were hollow and reinforced like those of modern birds, trading mass for strength, in a design that had been perfected over millions of years of evolution. Cryolophosaurus, whose name means cold dragon, was a close relative of Quetzalcoatlus and lived in what is now Canada. Its wingspan may have rivaled that of its southern cousin, and like Quetzalcoatlus, it belonged to a group called the Azhdarchids. These pterosaurs were distinctive for their long, stiff necks and proportionally enormous heads, often making up nearly half their total body length. Despite their size, these giants were not seabirds. In fact, many researchers believe Azhdarchids were primarily terrestrial hunters. Their anatomy suggests they could walk competently on all fours, using their long necks to snap up prey from the ground. They may have stalked open plains and coastal flats much like modern storks, feeding on small dinosaurs, mammals, lizards, and even carrion. A fully grown Quetzalcoatlus could have stood as tall as a giraffe when on the ground, peering across the landscape with a predator's patience. Taking off, however, was no small feat. With their immense wings, Azhdarchids likely used a powerful vaulting launch, pushing off with all four limbs in a single explosive motion to get airborne. Once aloft, they could soar for hours, riding thermal currents and scanning the ground below for movement. Their keen eyesight would have made them formidable hunters, able to spot a meal from great heights. One of the most remarkable aspects of these pterosaurs was how their size pushed the boundaries of flight physics. Modern engineering tells us there is an upper limit to how large a flying animal can be before its weight becomes too much for its wings to handle. Quetzalcoatlus and Cryolophosaurus skirted that limit, relying on light skeletons, efficient musculature, and environmental conditions that may have included warmer global temperatures and denser air. These factors would have helped keep their flight sustainable, even at such massive sizes. The fossil record of these creatures is tantalizingly incomplete. Much of what we know about their size comes from partial skeletons, a neck bone here, a wing segment there, which paleontologists have carefully compared to smaller, better preserved relatives. This means that reconstructions are still open to refinement, and new finds could change our understanding of exactly how big they were and how they lived. Their appearance in life would have been striking. Picture a narrow, tapering head ending in a long, pointed beak, perfectly shaped for spearing or grabbing prey. The neck was a rigid, elongated column supported by a lattice of strong bones. The body itself was surprisingly small compared to the head and neck, a compact frame designed to be as light as possible. Covered in a hair-like coating called pycnofibers, these pterosaurs would have had a texture somewhere between fur and feathers, helping them regulate their body temperature. On the ground, they may have looked almost alien, long-limbed, angular, and towering over much of the life around them. Yet in the air they would have been graceful and silent, drifting across the sky with the kind of ease that only comes from a lifetime spent in flight. While they were masters of the sky, their role in the ecosystem was not without risk. Large predators on the ground, including tyrannosaurs and other giant theropods, could have threatened them if they were caught before takeoff. Young pterosaurs would have been especially vulnerable until they reached their adult size. This likely influenced their nesting behaviour, though the exact details remain unknown due to the rarity of preserved nests or eggs in the fossil record. It is tempting to think of these giants as the dinosaur era's answer to modern raptors, but their lifestyle may have been even more varied. Some scientists have suggested that they could cover vast distances in search of food, much like modern albatrosses, crossing ancient coastlines and inland seas. Others see them as opportunistic feeders, taking whatever they could find from fish along riverbanks to the carcasses of much larger animals. The end of the Cretaceous brought their reign to an abrupt halt. Like the dinosaurs, the Ajadarchids did not survive the mass extinction event 66 million years ago. Their disappearance marked the end of truly giant flying creatures on Earth. Birds would eventually inherit the skies, but none would ever quite match the size or strange majesty of Quetzalcoatlus and Cryolophosaurus. Today, when we look at their fossils, we are reminded of the staggering diversity of life in the Mesozoic. These were not dinosaurs in the strict sense, yet they lived alongside them, hunted alongside them, and vanished alongside them. They were a parallel success story in the evolutionary arms race, proving that the sky was just as much a battleground and a stage for innovation as the land and the sea. Imagine standing on a Cretaceous floodplain as one of these giants passes overhead. Its shadow sweeps across you, the soft rush of air from its wings briefly filling your ears. It banks slightly, the afternoon sun catching the curve of its wing, and then it is gone, shrinking to a speck against the endless blue. In that moment you would have seen the last and greatest of the Sky Kings, rulers of a realm that few creatures before or since have truly conquered. In the late Cretaceous landscapes of western North America, herds of plant-eating giants roamed the river valleys and open plains. Some had duck-billed faces, others carried heavy armour, but few were as visually striking as the horned dinosaurs, ceratopsians. Among this remarkable group, two stand out for their extravagant headgear: Styracosaurus, with its fearsome crown of spikes, and Cosmoceratops, whose ornate frill looked more like the work of an overenthusiastic jeweller than a product of nature. Styracosaurus lived around 75 million years ago in what is now Alberta, Canada. It was a cousin of the more famous Triceratops, but where Triceratops had 3 horns and a solid frill, Styracosaurus had one long horn above its nose and a frill rimmed with 6 enormous spikes, each stretching up to 2 feet in length. These spikes curved slightly, giving the dinosaur's head the silhouette of a prehistoric sunburst. Combined with its bulk, up to 18 feet long and weighing several tons, it was an animal you would have noticed from a great distance. The purpose of this spectacular arrangement has been the subject of much debate. One possibility is defense. The long nasal horn and sharp frill spikes could certainly have made a predator think twice. A charging Styracosaurus would have been a formidable sight, capable of goring or deflecting an attacker with a toss of its head. However, many paleontologists believe the frill's main role was in display, attracting mates, intimidating rivals, and allowing individuals to recognize members of their own species. If that is the case, then the frill may have been covered in brightly coloured skin in life, turning it into a vibrant visual signal. The spikes could have accentuated head movements during displays, making the dinosaur's gestures all the more dramatic. Herd life would have made such displays important, as they could help establish social hierarchies without constant physical conflict. Cosmoceratops, on the other hand, took ornamentation to an entirely different level. Living slightly later in what is now Utah, Cosmoceratops had 15 horns and horn-like projections on its skull, more than any other known dinosaur. Above its eyes were 2 large forward-curving horns, while its frill was edged with a cascade of smaller, outward and downward-pointing spikes. If Styracosaurus looked like a sunburst, Cosmoceratops looked like a ceremonial headdress from another world. The sheer complexity of Cosmoceratops' headgear almost certainly points towards display as its primary function. Such elaborate structures would have required significant energy to grow and maintain, suggesting they provided a substantial evolutionary benefit, likely in attracting mates or establishing dominance. Like the extravagant tails of peacocks, these features may have signalled good health and strong genetics. In life, the frill and horns could have been highlighted with colour patterns, making the head a living canvas for communication. Both Styracosaurus and Cosmoceratops were herbivores, their beak-like mouths adapted for cropping tough vegetation. Behind the beak, batteries of teeth work like shears to slice plant material efficiently. They would have fed on ferns, cycads and flowering plants, and their large muscular bodies were built for steady grazing rather than speed. While capable of short bursts of movement, they relied more on bulk and group living for protection than on outrunning predators. Predators in their ecosystems included large tyrannosaurs, and here their horns and frills may have had a secondary role. Even if the frill was not primarily defensive, it still added bulk to the head and could help deflect a bite. The nasal horns of both species, particularly Styracosaurus's long central spike, would have been dangerous weapons if used in self-defense. Ceratopsians like these may have engaged in head-to-head combat with members of their own species. Fossil evidence from related dinosaurs shows healed wounds on the face and frill, suggesting that clashes occurred, perhaps during mating season or over territory. In such encounters, the horns could be locked or pushed against one another, with the frill acting as a shield. The spikes and projections could have made such contests both visually dramatic and physically challenging. Social life for these horned marvels was likely complex. They probably lived in herds, moving together across the floodplains in search of food and water. In such groups, visual communication would have been essential. The ability to signal from a distance, to display dominance without risking injury, and to identify potential mates would have been invaluable. The horns and frills were not just decorative, they were tools of social order. The evolutionary divergence between Styracosaurus in the north and Cosmoceratops in the south is also telling. During the late Cretaceous, North America was split by a shallow inland sea, creating two separate landmasses. This geographic isolation allowed horned dinosaurs in each region to develop their own distinctive styles of ornamentation. The result was a dazzling array of frill and horn shapes, each adapted to the preferences and pressures of its specific environment. In the fossil record, these animals remind us how much form can be shaped by function, and how much function can be shaped by social dynamics rather than simple survival. Styracosaurus and Cosmoceratops were not predators, yet they evolved some of the most intimidating and beautiful headgear in prehistory. Their horns were as much about communication as confrontation, about spectacle as much as survival. It is easy to imagine a late Cretaceous morning on the plains, with a herd of Styracosaurus grazing under the sun. A young male, eager to impress, raises his head high, the spikes of his frill catching the light. Nearby, Cosmoceratops steps forward, its elaborate headgear casting a complex pattern of shadows across the ground. No predator is in sight, yet the air feels charged. This is a display, a silent contest of beauty and presence that has been playing out for millions of years. In life, these horned dinosaurs must have been breathtaking, their frills and horns vibrant against the green of ancient vegetation. In death, their bones still carry the echoes of that display, the physical traces of a social world where appearance mattered, and where survival was about more than teeth and claws. Styracosaurus and Cosmoceratops remind us that in the age of dinosaurs, even the giants of the plant-eating world knew the power of making an impression. In the closing chapters of the Cretaceous period, the northern continents were home to herds of large plant-eating dinosaurs known as hadrosaurs, or duck-billed dinosaurs. They earned that nickname because of their broad, flattened snouts, which in life were lined with hundreds of tightly packed teeth designed for grinding tough vegetation. But within this family, some species took things a step further, growing spectacular bony crests on their heads, that were as puzzling to paleontologists as they were impressive to look at. Among the most remarkable of these crest bearers were Olorotitan and Lambeosaurus, two giants whose skulls seemed almost sculptural in their extravagance. Olorotitan, whose name means giant swan, lived in what is now eastern Russia about 68 million years ago. It was a tall, elegant hadrosaur with a particularly striking crest, a backward sweeping spike of bone that arched gracefully over the top of its head. In life, this crest was hollow inside, containing complex looping air passages that connected to the dinosaur's nasal cavity. Measuring over 30 feet from nose to tail, Olorotitan was a truly imposing sight, and its crest gave it a regal, almost mythical appearance. Lambeosaurus, on the other hand, had a very different style. Living in North America several million years earlier, Lambeosaurus sported a crest shaped like an axe blade or a hatchet, sloping forward over the top of the snout. Like Olorotitan's, its crest contained hollow chambers, though the exact layout of the internal passages varied between species and even between males and females. In both dinosaurs, the crests were not just lumps of decorative bone. They were intricately engineered anatomical features with clear ties to the respiratory system. This brings us to one of the biggest questions about these dinosaurs. What were the crests for? The prevailing theory is that they acted as resonating chambers for sound. When the dinosaur exhaled or vocalized, air would travel through the winding tubes inside the crest, producing deep, resonant calls that could carry over long distances. These sounds might have been used for communication within herds, to alert others to danger, call to mates, or maintain contact while travelling. The idea of crests as sound amplifiers is supported by computer modelling and reconstructions of their nasal passages. In some cases, the shapes of the airways suggest that each species would have had its own distinct voice, like a built-in acoustic fingerprint. This could have been important in busy ecosystems where multiple crest-bearing species lived side by side. Olorotitan might have produced a low, foghorn-like note, while Lambeosaurus may have generated a more trumpet-like call. Beyond sound, the crest likely had a strong visual role. The size and shape of the crest varied with age, suggesting they were important in sexual selection. Larger, more elaborate crests could indicate maturity and good health. The bony structure may have been covered in brightly coloured skin, making them even more conspicuous. During mating displays, two Olorotitan males might have faced each other, trumpeting and tilting their crests in the sunlight, while nearby females assessed the performance. Some researchers have also suggested that the crests may have played a role in thermoregulation, helping the animals shed excess body heat by increasing the surface area through which warm air passed. Others think they might have aided in species recognition, acting like visual name tags in herds that sometimes contained multiple kinds of hadrosaurs. What is particularly fascinating about these dinosaurs is how their unusual headgear evolved along such different paths, while still serving similar purposes. Olorotitan's crest swept elegantly backward, almost like the head plumes of certain modern birds, whereas Lambeosaurus's crest projected forward in a bold architectural arc. Both styles worked as sound resonators and visual signals, but the variation between them hints at a wide range of evolutionary experimentation within the hadrosaur family. Life for these giants would have revolved around constant movement in search of food. They were herbivores, grazing on ferns, horsetails, and flowering plants. Their sophisticated dental batteries, with hundreds of teeth arranged in tightly packed rows, allowed them to grind tough plant matter efficiently. Herd living likely provided protection against predators like tyrannosaurs, and the ability to produce loud, resonating calls would have helped keep the group together, even in dense forests or over wide floodplains. Fossil evidence also tells us that hadrosaurs like Olorotitan and Lambeosaurus were highly adaptable. They lived in regions with strong seasonal changes, meaning they may have had to migrate long distances or adjust their diets depending on the time of year. In such a world, the ability to communicate clearly over distance, whether to coordinate movement or signal alarm, would have been a major advantage. It is easy to imagine the scene, a herd of Olorotitan wading through a shallow river at dawn, mist curling around their legs. One individual raises its head, the crest silhouetted against the rising sun, and releases a long, low call that ripples through the cool air. Far away, another call answers, its pitch slightly different but unmistakably of the same kind. Somewhere nearby, a Lambeosaurus herd moves through the undergrowth, their forward-sweeping crests catching flashes of light as they vocalize in a more brassy tone. These sounds, now lost to time, would have been part of the soundtrack of the late Cretaceous, deep, resonant notes echoing through prehistoric valleys. And while we may never hear them exactly as they were, the fossil evidence gives us a tantalizing glimpse into the sensory world of these extraordinary dinosaurs. Their crests were more than just ornaments. They were tools of communication, symbols of identity, and perhaps even instruments in nature's own orchestra. In the end, Olorotitan and Lambeosaurus remind us that evolution is as much about beauty and expression as it is about survival. In the rich, competitive ecosystems of the Cretaceous, making yourself heard and seen could be just as important as being able to run fast or bite hard. And in these bone-crested giants, form and function came together in a way that was both strange and spectacular. In the lush, green landscapes of late Jurassic Africa, an unusual dinosaur moved slowly among the ferns and cycads. It was not especially large by the standards of its time, yet it carried an unmistakable air of medieval weaponry. This was Kentrosaurus, a smaller, spikier cousin of the more famous Stegosaurus, and it looked as though evolution had decided to arm it for every possible contingency. At first glance, Kentrosaurus followed the familiar Stegosaur body plan, a small head at the end of a long, low neck, a bulky, barrel-shaped body, and a tail bristling with sharp points. But where Stegosaurus wore broad, flat plates along most of its back, Kentrosaurus sported something far more menacing. Its shoulders and front half bore smaller, narrow plates, but as you moved toward the hips and tail, the plates gave way to long, sharp spikes. These were not decorative frills, they were weapons. Kentrosaurus measured about 15 feet from nose to tail, less than half the length of a big Stegosaurus. But what it lacked in size it made up for in intimidation. The spikes on its tail, which could reach nearly 2 feet in length, would have been capable of inflicting serious damage on any predator foolish enough to get too close. The arrangement of spikes along its lower back and flanks added an extra layer of defense, protecting areas that might otherwise be vulnerable. In life, this combination of armor and weaponry would have made Kentrosaurus a formidable opponent despite its plant-based diet. Its environment was far from peaceful. The region that is now Tanzania hosted predators like Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus, as well as packs of smaller carnivorous dinosaurs. For a slow-moving herbivore, being heavily armed was a matter of necessity. The defensive strategy of Kentrosaurus likely involved standing its ground when threatened, swinging its tail with precise whip-like motions. Paleontologists studying the tailbones have found that they were especially flexible near the base, allowing for rapid side-to-side movement, perfect for aiming those spikes where they were needed most. The head of Kentrosaurus was small, with a beak at the front for cropping plants and rows of teeth for chewing softer vegetation. It probably fed on low-growing ferns, cycads and horsetails, moving slowly through its habitat with the deliberate pace of an animal built more for defense than for speed. Its posture, with the head held low and the tail high, would have made it appear almost like a walking fortress, spikes projecting from multiple angles. The plates along the front half of its back still raise questions. In Stegosaurus, the plates may have been used for display or thermoregulation, and Kentrosaurus's smaller plates could have served a similar function. Perhaps they helped with temperature control, or perhaps they were simply a visual signal to other members of the species. They may also have been brightly coloured in life, adding an unexpected splash of visual flair to an otherwise fearsome profile. One particularly interesting feature is the pair of shoulder spikes that projected outward from either side of its body. These were long and sharp, angled in such a way that any predator approaching from the side would have to think twice before making a move. It is not hard to imagine a hungry Ceratosaurus eyeing a Kentrosaurus, only to reconsider after a quick mental calculation involving pain and pointy objects. Despite its armaments, Kentrosaurus was not invincible. Young individuals would have been far more vulnerable, their spikes shorter and less effective. Herd living may have provided extra safety, with adults forming a protective barrier around juveniles when threatened. A coordinated group of spike-wielding herbivores would have been a serious challenge for even the boldest predator. From a paleontological perspective, Kentrosaurus also offers a fascinating glimpse into the diversity within the stegosaur family. While its North American cousin Stegosaurus went for height and display with its towering plates, Kentrosaurus doubled down on direct defense, replacing decorative features with weapons. This suggests that even closely related dinosaurs could take very different evolutionary paths depending on their environment and the pressures they faced. The fossil record of Kentrosaurus is unusually rich, thanks to a series of well-preserved skeletons found in the Tendaguru Formation of Tanzania. These discoveries have allowed paleontologists to study not only the armour and spikes but also the details of its skeleton, providing insights into its posture, movement, and potential behaviour. In life, it would have been a striking sight. A relatively small dinosaur, but one so bristling with spikes that it looked ready to take on the world. It is tempting to think of Kentrosaurus as nature's answer to the medieval knight, complete with armour and lances. Yet unlike a knight, Kentrosaurus did not go looking for a fight. Its spikes were defensive tools, meant to discourage attack rather than invite it. In the prehistoric arms race between predator and prey, it was the equivalent of a do not disturb sign, delivered in the most pointy way imaginable. Even today, the silhouette of Kentrosaurus remains one of the most distinctive among dinosaurs. It is a reminder that survival can be about more than speed or stealth. Sometimes, it is about making yourself too dangerous to bother with, and in that regard, Kentrosaurus was a quiet master of its craft. In the cool, lush forests of Cretaceous North America, a low, tank-like shape moved steadily through the undergrowth. This was Borealopelta, an ankylosaur built for survival. With its massive body, short legs, and armour covering nearly every inch of skin, it looked like a living fortress. But this was not just a creature of brute force. Its fossil has revealed surprising details that tell a subtler story about life, danger, and even fashion choices in the age of dinosaurs. Borealopelta made headlines not only for its impressive defensive equipment, but for the remarkable state in which one specimen was found. In 2011, miners in Alberta, Canada, uncovered a fossil so well preserved that it looked almost like a statue. Not just bones, the armour plates, skin impressions, and even remnants of its last meal were still in place. It is one of the most detailed dinosaur fossils ever discovered, offering a window into features that are rarely preserved. The armour of Borealopelta was a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering. Large bony plates called osteoderms were embedded in the skin, forming a shield over its back, neck, and flanks. Some of these plates bore tall, sharp spikes, particularly over the shoulders, creating an intimidating profile. This was not an animal you would want to tackle. The tail, unlike the heavy club of some ankylosaurs, was less weapon-like but still muscular and capable of delivering a discouraging blow to anything foolish enough to attack. Yet the real surprise came when scientists examined the fossil under advanced imaging techniques. They found traces of pigments that suggested Borealopelta was not a uniform grey or brown, but rather had a pattern of darker coloration on its back and lighter tones on its underside. This is called countershading, a camouflage pattern used by many modern animals to break up their outline and make them harder to spot. It is common in fish, deer, and even some large mammals today, but finding it in a dinosaur of this size was unexpected. Why would a creature the size of a small bus covered in armour need camouflage? The answer is that the Cretaceous was home to predators big enough and dangerous enough to make even an armoured giant cautious. Borealopelta shared its world with large carnivores like Acrocanthosaurus, a predator that could reach lengths of over 30 feet. Being well defended did not mean being invulnerable, and if camouflage helped avoid detection in the first place, so much the better. Its name, meaning Northern Shield, reflects both its armour and the fact that its fossils were found far north of where many other ankylosaurs are known. This suggests it lived in cooler, forested environments, browsing on ferns and other low-growing plants. With its head held low to the ground and a wide beak-like mouth, Borealopelta could efficiently strip leaves and stems, feeding slowly but steadily. Its large gut likely fermented plant matter over long periods, extracting as much nutrition as possible from tough vegetation. The story of how this particular specimen was preserved is as remarkable as the creature itself. It appears that the dinosaur's body ended up in a river, where it was carried out to sea before sinking into soft sediment. The mineral-rich ocean floor quickly encased the carcass, protecting it from scavengers and decay. Over millions of years, those sediments turned to stone, locking Borealopelta in a natural sarcophagus until modern humans uncovered it. The preserved armour allows scientists to study how the plates were arranged in life, something that is often difficult to determine from disarticulated fossils. It also shows the texture of the skin between the plates, tough, pebbled, and likely resistant to bites or scratches. The spikes over the shoulders would have been especially effective at deterring attacks from above or the side, where a predator might try to latch on. Camouflage in such a heavily defended animal raises intriguing questions about predator-prey dynamics in the Cretaceous. It suggests that even the most heavily armoured herbivores lived under constant threat, and that survival depended not only on physical defences but on avoiding detection in the first place. It is a reminder that in nature, redundancy can be a virtue. Armour for when you are found, camouflage for when you hope not to be. Borealopelta also offers a lesson in how much the fossil record can surprise us. Before its discovery, it might have been assumed that large herbivores had little need for concealment. The detailed preservation of pigment patterns has reshaped that view, hinting at a far more complex picture of dinosaur ecosystems. This was not simply a slow-moving armoured grazer. It was an animal finely tuned to the challenges of its time, balancing defense with stealth. In life, a Borealopelta would have been an imposing presence, a creature that blended the slow, deliberate movements of a grazer with the quiet awareness of one always on the lookout for danger. Its armour told predators to keep their distance. Its coloration whispered, "You might not see me at all." Together, these traits made it one of the most secure herbivores in history. Not invincible, but close enough to make survival a well-practiced habit. Even as a fossil, Borealopelta commands attention. It stands as proof that the age of dinosaurs was not just about size and teeth. It was also about strategy, adaptation, and the fine balance between being seen and being safe. In an age dominated by towering giants and heavy-footed behemoths, Compsognathus was a predator that could have fit comfortably under your arm. Barely over a metre long from nose to tail tip, it was closer in size to a large chicken than a fearsome dinosaur, yet it lived the life of a hunter. In the late Jurassic landscapes of what is now Europe, this little creature proved that you didn't have to be massive to be effective. Compsognathus was built for speed and agility. Its body was light and slender, with long hind legs that could carry it across open ground in quick bursts. The tail was stiff and straight, acting as a counterbalance to its forward-leaning posture. Every part of its design suggested an animal adapted to chase down prey and react to sudden movements. With a narrow snout filled with sharp, pointed teeth, it was perfectly equipped to snap up the small animals that shared its world. Fossil evidence suggests that Compsognathus fed on a variety of small vertebrates, including lizards, which have been found preserved in the stomach cavity of at least one specimen. This is rare direct evidence of a dinosaur's diet, and it gives us a glimpse into its hunting style. It probably relied on keen eyesight to spot movement, then sprinted forward in quick darting lunges to snatch its meal before it could escape. While it lacked the bone-crushing jaws of larger theropods, Compsognathus didn't need brute force to survive. It thrived by being quick, precise, and opportunistic. In an ecosystem where giant predators like Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus ruled the top of the food chain, small hunters like Compsognathus carved out a niche by going after prey too small for the bigger carnivores to bother with. This reduced competition and allowed it to avoid direct confrontations with more dangerous dinosaurs. Its small size may also have been an advantage in other ways. Compsognathus could move easily through dense vegetation, slip between rocks, and hide in crevices that would be inaccessible to larger animals. It could follow prey into tight spaces or evade danger by darting into cover. In many ways, its lifestyle would have been similar to that of small predatory birds and reptiles today. Constantly alert, quick to seize an opportunity, and equally quick to vanish when trouble approached. The fossils of Compsognathus are significant for another reason. They were among the earliest reasonably complete dinosaur skeletons ever discovered in the 19th century. At the time, its bird-like proportions intrigued scientists and contributed to the growing recognition of the link between dinosaurs and birds. With its long, thin legs, three-toed feet, and lightweight skeleton, it was an early example of a dinosaur that challenged the old idea of them being slow, tail-dragging reptiles. Though Compsognathus is often portrayed as scurrying along the ground, there is evidence to suggest it might have been capable of short jumps or even brief leaps when pursuing prey. Its long toes and claws could grip uneven terrain, and its flexible neck allowed for quick, accurate strikes. Whether it hunted alone or in loose groups is unknown, but its agility and speed would have been effective enough without coordination. Its habitat in the Jurassic was a warm, island-dotted region, with a mixture of forests, lagoons, and coastal plains. Being small, Compsognathus could exploit a variety of microhabitats, from chasing insects in open clearings to snatching amphibians near the water's edge. The same small size that made it vulnerable to larger predators also allowed it to live in places where they could not easily follow. Despite its modest dimensions, Compsognathus earned a place in paleontological history and public imagination. Popular culture has sometimes exaggerated its role, portraying it in swarming packs overwhelming larger prey, a dramatic but unlikely scenario. In reality, it didn't need such theatrics to be impressive. It was a master of survival on its own scale, thriving by being fast, efficient, and adaptable. In the grand parade of dinosaurs, Compsognathus might have been easy to overlook, but that would have been a mistake. Its life was a constant balancing act between predator and prey, between boldness and caution. Every sprint, every pounce, every quick turn of its head was a calculated move in the daily game of survival. And in that game, being small was not a weakness. It was a finely honed strategy. Compsognathus shows us that in the Mesozoic world, power came in many forms. Some dinosaurs conquered through sheer size, others through armor or teeth. This little hunter did it through speed, precision, and the ability to live in the margins, proving that even in a land of giants, there was room for those who could master life in miniature. In the early Cretaceous landscapes of Asia, there lived a dinosaur that could have easily confused a time-travelling birdwatcher. Psittacosaurus, whose name means parrot lizard, was small, lightly built, and equipped with a sharp, curved beak that looked as though it had been borrowed from a tropical parrot. It was one of the earliest members of the Ceratopsian group, the same family that would eventually produce horned titans like Triceratops, but it looked nothing like its massive descendants. Instead, Psittacosaurus was a curious blend of primitive and advanced traits, stitched together in a way that made it unlike any other dinosaur. The first thing you would have noticed about Psittacosaurus was its head. The short, deep skull ended in that distinctive beak, perfect for clipping through tough plant matter. Behind the beak, rows of small, leaf-shaped teeth worked like shears, processing fibrous vegetation before it was swallowed. This combination of cropping beak and grinding teeth made Psittacosaurus an efficient herbivore, able to feed on everything from young shoots to hardy cycads and ferns, but its diet may have been more varied than you'd expect. Some researchers suggest that Psittacosaurus may have been an opportunistic omnivore, occasionally supplementing its plant diet with insects or other small prey. Its beak could easily nip through an unsuspecting beetle's shell, and its small size would have allowed it to forage in places where more specialised herbivores might not have bothered. In that way, it may have filled a role similar to modern birds like ground-feeding parrots or pheasants. Psittacosaurus was not a large dinosaur. Most individuals were about 2 meters long from nose to tail, with much of that length in the tail itself. It was lightly built and probably quick on its feet, moving on 2 legs for speed but capable of dropping to all 4s when necessary, especially while feeding. Fossils from across China, Mongolia and Siberia show that it was both widespread and adaptable, thriving in a variety of environments from forested areas to more open landscapes. Then there's the tail, and this is where Psittacosaurus becomes even stranger. Along the top of its tail ran a series of long, stiff bristles. These weren't feathers, but more like modified scales, similar in structure to the quills seen on some modern reptiles. They may have been used for display, perhaps to signal to mates or warn rivals. Imagine a Psittacosaurus raising its bristle-covered tail like a prehistoric bottle brush, to impress a potential partner or to make itself appear larger in the face of danger. The function isn't certain, but it adds a layer of personality to an already distinctive dinosaur. Its eyes were relatively large, suggesting keen vision, an advantage for spotting predators in a world where danger could come from above or below. Psittacosaurus shared its habitat with small, agile raptors, as well as larger meat-eaters that could easily have made a meal of it. Staying alert and ready to dash for cover would have been essential for survival. The bristled tail might even have served as a distraction, drawing a predator's strike away from its body. One of the most fascinating things about Psittacosaurus is how much we've learned from its exceptionally well-preserved fossils. Some specimens are so complete that they retain impressions of skin, bristles, and even hints of colour patterns. Evidence suggests that it may have been counter-shaded, with a lighter underside and darker back. The same camouflage strategy used by many modern animals from deer to sharks. This would have helped it blend into the dappled light of the forest floor, breaking up its outline and making it harder for predators to spot. Juvenile Psittacosaurus fossils show that the young were proportionally different from adults, with longer legs relative to their bodies. This suggests that hatchlings were probably even more reliant on speed to escape danger, and they may have lived in groups for added protection. There's even some evidence from bone beds that Psittacosaurus may have been at least partially social, with individuals found together. Whether they formed stable herds or just loose aggregations is uncertain, but it paints a picture of an animal that didn't live entirely in isolation. The sheer number of Psittacosaurus fossils found, in the hundreds, also tells us that it was a highly successful dinosaur. Its adaptability in diet, habitat and movement style likely contributed to its survival for millions of years. It may not have had horns, frills or a massive frame, but its unusual combination of traits worked perfectly for its ecological niche. Looking at Psittacosaurus is like peering into the early chapters of the Ceratopsian story, before the extravagant headgear evolved. It's a reminder that evolution often starts with small, versatile forms before branching out into more specialised designs. With its parrot-like beak, bristled tail and lightly built frame, Psittacosaurus was a quiet innovator, a dinosaur that thrived not through size or brute strength, but through adaptability and a dash of prehistoric flair. In the vast gallery of dinosaur diversity, Psittacosaurus may not be the loudest or the largest exhibit, but it is one of the most charmingly peculiar. It shows us that strange in nature is rarely accidental. It's often the product of countless subtle experiments, honed over ages, until they become just right for the life an animal leads. In the frozen heart of what is now Antarctica, long before it was a desolate sheet of ice, a remarkable predator roamed the forests. This was Cryolophosaurus, sometimes nicknamed the Elvisaurus, for the peculiar crest that arched across the top of its head like a swept-back pompadour. It lived during the early Jurassic period, roughly 190 million years ago, at a time when Antarctica was still attached to other southern continents as part of Gondwana. The climate then was far milder than today, but it was still a polar environment with long, dark winters and periods when the sun barely skimmed the horizon. Cryolophosaurus was a theropod dinosaur, part of the same broad group as later carnivores like Allosaurus and Tyrannosaurus, but it was distinct in both appearance and lifestyle. At over 6 meters long, it was a sizable predator, yet it wasn't the giant of its time. What truly set it apart was that curious crest, a thin plate of bone running across its skull from side to side just above the eyes. Unlike the forward-pointing crests of many dinosaurs, this one swept sideways like a decorative bar, giving it a silhouette unlike anything else in the fossil record. The exact purpose of this crest is still debated. It was far too fragile to serve as a weapon, and didn't seem to improve its sense of smell or hearing. The most likely explanation is that it was a visual display structure, used to attract mates or signal dominance to rivals. In the dim, angled light of the polar sun, the crest might have caught and reflected colours in a way that made Cryolophosaurus stand out to others of its kind. This suggests that sight, and possibly even colour recognition, played a role in its social interactions. Living in Antarctica presented unique challenges. Even in the Jurassic, when the world was warmer overall, high latitudes meant seasonal extremes. Cryolophosaurus would have experienced months where daylight was scarce, followed by months of extended sunlight. These changing conditions would have affected prey availability, plant growth and temperature. While freezing conditions were likely not as severe as today's Antarctic winters, frost and snow may still have been a part of the seasonal cycle. To survive in such an environment, Cryolophosaurus probably needed to be opportunistic in its diet. Fossil evidence suggests it preyed on large herbivorous dinosaurs like Glacialosaurus, as well as smaller reptiles and perhaps early mammals. It may also have scavenged carcasses when hunting was difficult. Its teeth, sharp and serrated, were well suited to slicing through flesh, and its strong hind legs gave it the speed to pursue prey across uneven forested terrain. The forests of Jurassic Antarctica would have been quite different from modern polar landscapes. Instead of ice sheets, there were stands of conifers, ginkgos, and tree ferns. Seasonal growth patterns meant that food for herbivores, and therefore for predators, would wax and wane with the light. Cryolophosaurus may have had to adjust its hunting strategy according to the season, perhaps becoming more active during the months of endless twilight, when cooler temperatures slowed some prey species. One of the most fascinating aspects of Cryolophosaurus is what it reveals about dinosaur adaptability. Its existence shows that large theropods could thrive in environments with prolonged darkness and seasonal scarcity. Some scientists speculate that it might have had seasonal metabolic adjustments, similar to modern animals that slow their energy use during lean times. While there is no evidence that it hibernated, it could have reduced activity during the harshest months, conserving energy until conditions improved. The discovery of Cryolophosaurus was a landmark in paleontology. It was the first meat-eating dinosaur found on the frozen continent, and its fossils were unearthed at more than 4,000 meters above sea level in the Transantarctic Mountains. At the time of discovery in the early 1990s, the find challenged assumptions about where dinosaurs could live. It proved that they were not confined to lush equatorial regions but could also inhabit environments we might consider extreme. Its anatomy also bridges an interesting evolutionary gap. Cryolophosaurus has features that resemble both earlier theropods and more advanced later forms, making it an important piece in understanding the evolution of carnivorous dinosaurs. Its skull shape, limb proportions and hip structure place it near the base of a branch that would eventually give rise to some of the largest predators in history. It is intriguing to imagine what Cryolophosaurus's world looked like. Picture a dimly lit forest with long shadows, snow-dusted ground in the winter months, and ferns pushing through the soil in the summer thaw. Through the trees, a tall, lithe predator moves silently, the unusual crest on its head breaking the outline of its silhouette. It pauses, scanning the undergrowth for movement, its breath visible in the crisp air. This was a hunter adapted to a land of contrasts, where survival depended on both physical ability and the capacity to endure long cycles of feast and famine. In many ways, Cryolophosaurus embodies the flexibility of dinosaurs as a whole. It lived far from the tropical scenes we often picture when we think of the Mesozoic, in a place that demanded resilience and adaptability. Its strange crest adds a note of elegance to its image, a reminder that even in the cold, survival can leave room for beauty. In the early Cretaceous landscapes of what is now Argentina, an unusual sauropod wandered among the conifers and cycads. Amargasaurus was not the colossal, long-necked giant you might expect from the sauropod family. At roughly 10 meters in length, it was modest by sauropod standards, but what it lacked in sheer size, it made up for with a neck unlike any other. Rising from its vertebrae was a striking double row of elongated spines, each jutting upwards like the masts of a miniature ship. These spines are the feature that has fascinated paleontologists since Amargasaurus was first described in the 1990s. They extended along much of its neck and part of its back, and in life they could have reached over 60 centimeters tall, yet their exact purpose remains a topic of lively debate. Were they weapons, display structures, or something entirely different? The answer is still uncertain, and each possibility paints a different picture of how this dinosaur lived. One hypothesis is that these spines were connected by skin, forming a pair of low sails running along the neck. If so, they might have served as thermoregulation devices, helping Amargasaurus absorb heat in the cool mornings or release it during the midday sun. In the warm, often dry climate of early Cretaceous South America, keeping a stable body temperature would have been a constant challenge for large animals. A sail could have functioned much like the ears of an elephant, acting as a heat exchange surface to fine-tune the animal's internal thermostat. Another possibility is that the spines were covered in keratin, much like a rhino's horn, creating a formidable defensive barrier. While Amargasaurus was a plant-eater, it lived alongside some serious predators, including Carcharodontosaurids, massive carnivores with blade-like teeth. A neck lined with stiff, sharp-tipped spines would have made it far harder for a predator to bring the head down in a killing bite. In close quarters, those spines could have acted like a natural set of pikes, discouraging attacks from the side. There is also the display theory, the idea that the spines were primarily for visual impact. In many animals, the most elaborate features are not about survival in the narrow sense, but about attracting mates or intimidating rivals. A pair of tall, symmetrical spines could have been brightly coloured or patterned, turning the neck of Amargasaurus into a moving banner. If the spines were used in mating displays, individuals with larger or more striking structures might have had an advantage in passing on their genes. Whatever their function, these spines would have made Amargasaurus instantly recognisable on the Cretaceous floodplains. Imagine a herd moving slowly through the vegetation, long necks sweeping from side to side to strip leaves, the double row of spines forming a jagged silhouette against the sky. This was a sauropod that defied the standard image of smooth, pillar-necked giants, instead blending grace with a touch of the bizarre. Amargasaurus likely fed on low to medium-height vegetation, using its relatively short neck to browse among ferns, cycads, and the lower branches of conifer trees. Its teeth were peg-like and not built for chewing. Instead, it probably stripped leaves and swallowed them whole, letting its large gut do the work of breaking down tough plant fibres. As a mid-sized sauropod, it may have been more agile than its bulkier relatives, able to navigate through denser patches of forest in search of food. Its environment was a land in transition, shaped by volcanic activity and seasonal rainfall. The area that would become Argentina lay closer to the southern edge of the supercontinent Gondwana, with ecosystems that supported a rich diversity of dinosaurs. Herds of herbivores roamed the plains, followed at a distance by apex predators. Smaller reptiles, early mammals, and pterosaurs filled the ecological gaps in between. For Amargasaurus, safety would have come from both group living and its unusual anatomy. The fossil evidence suggests that Amargasaurus was closely related to Diplodocus and other members of the Diplodocid family, though it took that shared blueprint in a unique direction. Its neck was proportionally shorter, and its body was more compact, perhaps an adaptation to its specific habitat and lifestyle. In many ways, it was a specialist, an animal that had evolved to succeed in a niche where sheer size was not the only measure of survival. It's tempting to picture these spines in life, catching the low Cretaceous sunlight, perhaps swaying slightly as the animal walked. Whether they served as weapons, sails, or ornaments, they gave Amargasaurus a character unlike any other dinosaur we know. It stands as a reminder that evolution often experiments in unexpected ways, producing designs that seem almost too strange to be practical, yet clearly worked well enough for the species to thrive. In the end, Amargasaurus may remain something of an enigma. Without a living specimen to observe, the full truth of those spines' purpose might never be known. But in that mystery lies part of its charm. Among the giants of its time, this was a dinosaur that combined the familiar sauropod shape with a striking, almost otherworldly twist. A creature that shows us just how inventive nature can be when sculpting life. In the arid Cretaceous deserts of what is now Mongolia, a small feathered dinosaur scurried across the dunes, its long legs carrying it swiftly from one patch of scrub to another. This was Mononykus, a creature whose name means single claw, and whose entire four-limb design seemed to defy the standard blueprint of a theropod dinosaur. At first glance, Mononykus appeared almost bird-like, light, agile, and built for speed. But its arms told a stranger story. Most theropods, from Velociraptor to Tyrannosaurus, had grasping claws capable of catching prey or manipulating food. Mononykus, however, had reduced its forelimbs to tiny sturdy structures ending in one large functional claw. This wasn't a tool for grabbing or slashing. It was more like a specialized digging implement. The rest of the digits had been lost or shrunk, leaving a streamlined arm that could be powered by strong shoulder and chest muscles. What could such an odd adaptation be for? The leading theory is that Mononykus was an insect hunter, targeting the nests of social insects like termites. Its single claw could have been used to break into hardened termite mounds or tear apart rotting wood where colonies hid. Once the outer shell was breached, its narrow tubular snout could reach in to snap up the prize. The idea is supported by its tiny, peg-like teeth, which would have been well suited for gripping small, soft-bodied prey rather than slicing through flesh. Its long, slender legs were clearly made for running. The desert would have been a dangerous place, home to predators far larger than Mononykus. Speed was likely its best defense, and its build suggests it could sprint quickly across open ground, much like a modern roadrunner. The combination of rapid movement and specialized feeding made it a niche expert, thriving in places where larger dinosaurs might struggle. Mononykus was small, less than a meter in length, and feathered, with a covering of simple hair-like filaments that would have offered some insulation against the temperature extremes of its environment. The Cretaceous desert was not just hot, it could also become bitterly cold at night. Feathers would have trapped heat during the chill hours, while also offering some shade protection during the day. Its light frame and low weight would have made it well suited for moving across sandy terrain without sinking too deeply into it. Its eyes were large for its size, hinting at keen vision, perhaps important for spotting insect movement or detecting the approach of predators. The deserts of ancient Mongolia were open landscapes punctuated by occasional plants, seasonal streams, and patches of harder, more compact ground. In such an environment, the ability to detect danger from a distance could mean the difference between life and death. When Mononykus was first described in the 1990s, it caused a stir in paleontology circles. Its bird-like features, fused wrist bones, keeled sternum for strong flight muscles, and feathers placed it tantalizingly close to the evolutionary line of modern birds. Yet its lifestyle was clearly grounded in the dust of the Cretaceous desert, with no adaptations for flight. This combination of traits made it a fascinating snapshot of evolution's experimental stage, where not every bird-like dinosaur took to the skies. One of the most intriguing aspects of Mononykus is how specialized it became. Evolution tends to favor specialization when an animal finds a stable, resource-rich niche. In this case, termites and other social insects likely provided a reliable food source, even in the harshest seasons. The problem with specialization, however, is that it comes at a cost. If the environment changes or the food source disappears, highly specialized animals often struggle to adapt. While Mononykus may have been perfectly suited to its time and place, such precision might also have made it vulnerable to extinction when conditions shifted. Still, during its reign, it would have been an efficient desert dweller. You can imagine it darting across the dunes, pausing to sniff or listen at a mound before rapidly scraping away at the surface with its powerful single claw. The dust would fly, and within moments its beak-like snout would be probing for the rich, protein-packed insects inside. It is a life that echoes modern ant-eating mammals and birds, convergent evolution at work, producing similar solutions in completely unrelated animals. Mononykus reminds us that dinosaurs were far more than just the towering plant eaters and fearsome predators often depicted in popular media. They were also small, delicate, and sometimes surprisingly cute creatures that occupied every available niche in their ecosystems. From the forest canopy to the deep seas, and yes, even to the windswept dunes of ancient deserts, dinosaurs adapted in remarkable ways. Its single claw, once seen as a curiosity, now stands as a symbol of that adaptability. In the endless laboratory of evolution, sometimes the most successful designs are the ones that seem the most unlikely. Mononykus may not have been a giant, a predator of epic scale, or a showpiece of dazzling ornamentation, but it was perfectly suited to its corner of the Cretaceous world, and in its own quiet way it thrived. In the chilly early Cretaceous forests of what is now northeastern China, a predator stalked on powerful legs, its silhouette towering above most other animals in the region. At nearly 9 meters long and weighing close to 1.5 tons, it had the size and build of a formidable apex hunter. Yet this was not the scaly, crocodile-skinned beast that popular culture has taught us to expect. This was Yutyrannus, the feathered tyrant, and its body was cloaked in a thick layer of filament-like feathers. The discovery of Yutyrannus in the 2010s was a genuine game-changer in paleontology. For decades, scientists had suspected that many small theropods, particularly those closely related to birds, were feathered. But Yutyrannus was no tiny creature. This was the largest known dinosaur with direct fossil evidence of feathers, and it shattered the assumption that large carnivorous dinosaurs would have gone completely scaly as they grew. Its feathers were not the sleek aerodynamic flight feathers of a modern eagle. Instead, they were simple, hair-like filaments, more akin to a shaggy coat than a wing. Their purpose was not to lift the animal into the air but to keep it warm in the cool, temperate climate of early Cretaceous Liaoning. This was a land of frosty winters and chilly mornings, and insulation would have been a valuable asset for a cold-blooded, or at least mesothermic, hunter. While Yutyrannus was not as massive as its famous relative Tyrannosaurus rex, it still had a skull over 1 meter long, lined with serrated teeth ideal for slicing through flesh. Its strong legs and large feet suggest it was a capable runner, able to chase down prey across the patchwork of forests, river plains, and lake shores it inhabited. The landscape was shared with a rich array of other dinosaurs, including smaller feathered predators, plant-eating ornithopods, and early ceratopsians. One fascinating aspect of Yutyrannus is how its feathers reshape our image of tyrannosaurs in general. It lived about 60 million years before Tyrannosaurus rex, meaning there was plenty of time for different skin coverings to evolve in the lineage. Some scientists have suggested that T-Rex might also have had feathers when young, losing them as it grew, much like how some mammals shed their juvenile coats. Others believe that in warmer climates, large tyrannosaurs might have abandoned feathers altogether, relying on size and heat regulation through bare skin. Yutyrannus, however, shows that even apex predators could keep a feathered coat if the environment demanded it. Its name translates to feathered tyrant, and it's easy to imagine how it might have looked in life. A huge, deep-chested predator with a mane of downy filaments catching the breeze as it moved. These feathers could have also played a role in display, particularly during courtship or territorial disputes. A puffed-up Yutyrannus, with its coat bristling in the cold air, would have been an impressive sight to friend and foe alike. Hunting strategies for such a large predator may have involved ambush rather than long pursuits. Yutyrannus's legs were strong, but they lack the extreme cursorial adaptations of smaller hunters. It might have relied on cover to approach herds of plant-eaters before launching a short, explosive sprint to close the distance. Its powerful bite and clawed forelimbs, each arm ending in 3 strong fingers, would have been lethal tools for subduing prey. The layering fossil beds where Yutyrannus was found are renowned for preserving delicate details, including feathers, skin impressions, and even stomach contents in some specimens. The fact that 3 nearly complete Yutyrannus skeletons were found together suggests they may have lived in small groups. If that is true, coordinated hunting might have been possible, although it's equally plausible they were drawn together by a shared food source after a kill. Beyond its direct biology, Yutyrannus has had a lasting cultural impact. It helped shift public perception of dinosaurs away from the lumbering reptilian giants of early portrayals toward a more bird-like reality. It also reminded us that nature's designs are not bound by our expectations. A predator could be both terrifying and fluffy at the same time. Its extinction, like that of many Cretaceous species, is still a mystery tied to the slow but inevitable changes in climate, vegetation and competition. By the time the late Cretaceous rolled around, tyrannosaurs had diversified, and the feathered giant of Liaoning had given way to new rulers of the land. But in its time, it was a master of its environment, a perfect blend of power, speed and adaptation. Standing in the snow-dusted forests of ancient China, Yutyrannus would have been a sight to behold. Its massive head swinging as it scanned the horizon, breath steaming in the cold air, feathers ruffling in the wind, a reminder that even the mightiest predators sometimes wear their armour not in scales but in softness. In the early 1920s, paleontologists working in the Gobi Desert uncovered a striking scene frozen in stone. A small, bird-like dinosaur lay sprawled across a clutch of eggs. Its beak-like jaws were toothless, and its arms, feathered in life, stretched protectively around the nest. But the paleontologists of the time didn't see a devoted parent. They saw a thief caught in the act. The name they gave it was Oviraptor, meaning egg thief, and for decades it carried that undeserved reputation. The idea seemed to make sense at first. Oviraptor's beak was strong, curved, and perfect for cracking through hard shells, and it had been found atop eggs that didn't appear to be its own. Scientists assumed it had been raiding the nest of a plant-eater called Protoceratops, when a sudden sandstorm buried both in place. It was a tidy story, until better evidence came along and turned it on its head. In the 1990s, more fossil discoveries in Mongolia revealed something remarkable. The eggs that Oviraptor had been found guarding were not Protoceratops eggs at all. They belonged to its own species. What had been mistaken for a theft was actually an act of brooding, a parent sitting on its eggs to keep them warm and safe. The original egg thief was, in fact, one of the earliest known examples of parental care in non-avian dinosaurs. Oviraptor was an oviraptorid theropod, part of a group that lived in Asia during the late Cretaceous. These were small to medium-sized dinosaurs, usually around 2 meters long, with parrot-like beaks, short tails and feathers. Their skulls often sported decorative crests, which may have been used for display or communication. They were lightweight, agile, and likely quite intelligent compared to many other dinosaurs. The beak of Oviraptor, once assumed to be specialised for egg cracking, now seems better suited for a varied diet. Some researchers think it ate tough plant material, nuts or mollusks. Others suggest it might have been an opportunistic omnivore, willing to take eggs on occasion but not as its main food source. Its jaws could generate a powerful bite, so it had plenty of options in the menu department. What truly makes Oviraptor fascinating, though, is the image of it as a nurturing creature. Fossils show individuals preserved in brooding positions nearly identical to modern birds, with their arms spread over their eggs and their bodies positioned to provide warmth. The eggs themselves were often arranged in neat circles, with the pointed ends facing inward, a careful, deliberate nesting pattern. This level of organisation suggests that Oviraptor's parenting behaviour was not an accident of instinct, but a refined and vital part of its life cycle. Some nests even contained embryos preserved inside the eggs, allowing scientists to confirm species identity and better understand their development. These discoveries also suggest that Oviraptor's feathers played an important role in incubation, much like in birds today. The soft, insulating plumage would have helped maintain a steady temperature, and the adult's body would have shielded the eggs from wind and shifting sand. The Gobi Desert of the late Cretaceous was not the endless arid wasteland it is now. It was a mix of dry plains, seasonal rivers, and patches of vegetation, with a climate that could swing between scorching days and cool nights. Predators prowled, and sudden sandstorms could strike without warning. Raising young in such a place required vigilance, and Oviraptor seems to have been up to the task. Its strong hind legs and agile frame would have allowed it to chase off smaller predators or dart away from larger ones, and its sharp eyes and likely good hearing would have made it an attentive sentinel. Given that multiple fossils have been found in brooding positions, it's possible that both males and females participated in egg care, a behaviour still seen in many modern bird species. The irony of Oviraptor's name has not been lost on paleontologists. In fact, it has become a classic cautionary tale in science about jumping to conclusions. A single fossil can tell an incomplete story, and interpretations can shift dramatically as new evidence comes to light. What began as a supposed thief turned out to be one of the most dedicated parents in the dinosaur world. Oviraptor's reputation makeover also adds depth to our understanding of dinosaur behaviour. For a long time, dinosaurs were viewed purely as primitive reptiles, driven by little more than instinct to eat, grow, and reproduce. But creatures like Oviraptor blur the lines between cold-blooded reptile and warm-blooded bird. Their brooding, nest-building and possible group living point to a complexity of life that we once thought was the sole domain of mammals and modern birds. If you could travel back to the late Cretaceous and find an Oviraptor nest, you might see a small, feathered creature crouched low, crest glinting in the sun, eyes flicking between the horizon and the eggs beneath its chest. It would shift slightly now and then, adjusting to keep the warmth even, perhaps making soft calls to its unhatched young. And when those eggs finally cracked open, the first thing the hatchlings would see would not be a predator's gaping beak, but the watchful gaze of a parent who had guarded them from the moment they were laid. When most people think about dinosaurs, they picture massive skeletons in museums or fearsome reptiles roaming ancient landscapes. But the truth is, dinosaurs are not gone. They are all around us, flitting through trees, pecking at the ground, and occasionally stealing your chips at the beach. Modern birds are the living descendants of theropod dinosaurs, carrying with them a heritage that stretches back over 150 million years. The link between birds and dinosaurs was first hinted at in the 19th century, with the discovery of Archaeopteryx, a fossil from the late Jurassic that had feathers like a bird but teeth, and a long bony tail like a dinosaur. At first, many scientists resisted the idea, thinking birds must have evolved from some other reptile group. But as more fossils emerged, especially from China, the evidence became overwhelming. Bird-like dinosaurs had feathers, wishbones, hollow bones, and even wing-like arms long before true birds appeared. One of the key groups connecting dinosaurs to birds is the Maniraptoran theropods. These were small to medium-sized predators, many with feathers and adaptations for perching, climbing, or gliding. Creatures like Velociraptor, Microraptor, and Oviraptor all belong to this branch of the dinosaur family tree. Birds inherited many of their traits, like skeletons for efficient movement, a keeled breastbone for powerful flight muscles, and advanced lungs that circulate air in one direction, allowing for incredible stamina. Feathers themselves likely began as simple filaments for insulation or display, not flight. Over millions of years, they evolved into the complex structures we see today, capable of lifting an animal into the sky. Even so, not all early birds could fly. Some were ground-dwelling runners, and others were gliders hopping between trees. Flight as we know it was refined gradually, shaped by trial and error in the evolutionary process. Another surprising inheritance is the beak. Early birds and their close dinosaur relatives still had teeth, but over time, beaks replaced them in most species. Beaks are lightweight yet versatile, able to adapt to a huge range of diets, from the seed-crushing bills of finches to the spear-like beaks of herons. This shift likely helped reduce body weight for flight and allowed for faster reproduction, as lighter eggs could develop more quickly. Birds also kept some behaviours that we once thought were unique to mammals. Nest building, brooding, and active parental care, all traits seen in certain dinosaurs like Oviraptor and Troodon, are now universal among birds. The meticulous way a robin arranges twigs or the way a penguin guards its chick from the cold is part of a behavioural legacy stretching deep into the Mesozoic. Even their respiratory system is a dinosaur hand-me-down. Many theropod dinosaurs had a system of air sacs connected to their lungs, keeping a constant flow of oxygen-rich air moving through their bodies. This not only improved stamina, but may have helped regulate body temperature, supporting the idea that many dinosaurs were warm-blooded. In birds, this system is even more efficient, allowing them to power the intense demands of flight. Their skeletons also preserve echoes of their ancestors. The wishbone, or furcula, acts like a spring during flight, storing and releasing energy with each wing beat. This structure existed in some non-avian dinosaurs long before the first bird took off. Their feet too carry the three-toed pattern of theropod dinosaurs, with some retaining a hallux, a backward-pointing toe, for perching. But perhaps the most striking continuity is in their diversity. Dinosaurs once filled nearly every ecological niche on land, from giant plant eaters to apex predators to nimble insect catchers. Birds have mirrored that success in the modern world. There are tiny hummingbirds that weigh less than a coin, and albatrosses that can glide over oceans for months. Some birds run faster than many mammals, others dive deeper than most fish, and a few, like parrots and corvids, rival primates in problem-solving skills. Fossils from the Cretaceous show that early birds lived alongside their dinosaur relatives for millions of years before the mass extinction event 66 million years ago. When that catastrophe struck, wiping out all non-avian dinosaurs, the ancestors of modern birds managed to survive. Their small size, adaptable diets, and ability to exploit different habitats likely gave them the edge in a devastated world. From there, they radiated into an extraordinary range of forms. Today, with over 10,000 known species, birds occupy almost every corner of the planet, from Antarctic icefields to tropical rainforests. Every flap of a sparrow's wings or call of a crow is a reminder that dinosaurs never truly disappeared. They simply changed shape. Next time you watch a hawk circling high above or a pigeon strutting in a city square, you're seeing a direct descendant of creatures that once ruled the earth. Their bones, feathers, lungs, and even some of their quirks are heirlooms from an ancient age. In a very real sense, the age of dinosaurs never ended. It just got a little lighter, a little fluffier, and learned how to sing. When we call a dinosaur strange, what we really mean is that it doesn't fit neatly into the shapes and behaviours we expect. But in the grand scheme of life, strange is not the exception, it is the rule. evolution is an artist with a sense of humour, a flair for drama, and a habit of trying the unexpected just to see if it works. Long necks that stretch far beyond the limits of modern animals, domed skulls thicker than a brick wall, sails, spines, crests, and feathers in every conceivable shape. Each of these features might look odd to us, but to the creatures that carried them, they were simply normal. These adaptations weren't there to amuse a future species of primate that would dig them up and give them names. They were there because they worked. In a world of competition, predators, changing climates, and scarce resources, anything that gave an edge, no matter how eccentric, was worth keeping. The enormous claws of Therizinosaurus were not a stylistic choice. They were tools. The sail of Spinosaurus may have been strange, but it may also have been a lifeline for regulating body temperature or signalling to a mate. The elaborate horns and frills of Styracosaurus or Cosmoceratops were not over-the-top accessories. They were vital parts of a survival strategy that included display, defense, and species recognition. From our perspective, it's tempting to think of evolution as aiming toward elegance or simplicity. But nature doesn't have an aesthetic committee. What survives is what works, and what works might sometimes look ridiculous, until you realise it's been fine-tuned over millions of years for a very specific purpose. Oddity, in evolutionary terms, is simply adaptation viewed without context. Give it context, and suddenly it makes perfect sense. Of course, as much as we marvel at the creatures we do know, there's an even greater mystery beneath our feet. For every dinosaur species we've named, there may be dozens, even hundreds, that have never been found. The fossil record is incomplete, and most creatures vanish without leaving a single trace. The odds of an animal's bones surviving the ages, being preserved in the right conditions, uncovered by erosion, and then found by a human are vanishingly small. That means there are likely countless species with adaptations we can't yet imagine. Perhaps there were dinosaurs with features so peculiar that even the most speculative paleartist would hesitate to draw them. And that circles us back to the question we began with. What makes a dinosaur strange? Is it because it doesn't resemble anything alive today? Or because it challenges our idea of what life is supposed to look like? Maybe the better question is, if these creatures could look at us, with our bare skin, clumsy hands, and tendency to build metal boxes on wheels, would they think we were the strange ones? The truth is, every era of life is filled with its own brand of peculiar. To a Devonian fish, a giraffe would be absurd. To a Cambrian trilobite, a bird would be downright implausible. And to a Jurassic Mamenchisaurus, humans might not even register as important enough to be odd. Just small, slow-moving animals barely worth noticing. Our idea of weird is shaped entirely by our perspective and our place in time. This is what makes studying dinosaurs, and evolution as a whole, such a humbling experience. It reminds us that life is not marching toward a perfect endpoint. It's branching, experimenting, adapting to whatever challenges the environment throws at it. In that sense, the strangest dinosaurs are not outliers. They're proof of the endless creativity of nature's process. And somewhere out there, in the untouched rock layers of deserts, mountains, or cliffsides, there may be fossils waiting to rewrite our definitions yet again. Maybe there was a dinosaur with sails like butterfly wings, or one that mimicked plants so perfectly it could disappear in a forest. Maybe there are creatures whose bones will make us laugh in disbelief before we scramble to figure out how they lived. The past is full of surprises. We just haven't dug them all up yet. So as we close this journey through the world of the strangest dinosaurs, keep that curiosity alive. Remember that weird is just another word for unexpected, and the unexpected is where the best discoveries hide. Nature will never run out of ideas, and we will never run out of reasons to be amazed.